Tonight, we're uncovering the tragic story of Jacaerys Velaryon, the Dragon Prince lost at sea. This is a topic with a lot to uncover, but I'll keep my narration calm so you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine, if you will, the salt-sprayed cliffs of Dragonstone, where the air is thick with the scent of sulfur and the restless energy of the narrow sea. High above the jagged obsidian towers, a young prince circles on a dragon of pale green and silver. To the world, he is Jacaerys Velaryon, the heir to the Iron Throne, the eldest son of Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, and the hope of a dynasty. But beneath the royal titles and the gleaming armor of a dragon rider, there is a boy who carries the weight of a kingdom and the sting of 1,000 whispers. He is a prince defined by a paradox, a boy who lived his life with the impeccable grace of a true king, yet died in the cold, churning waters of the Gullet before he could ever sit upon the throne he was born to inherit. The story of Jasaerous, or Jace as he was known to those who loved him, is perhaps the most poignant thread in the entire tapestry of the Dance of the Dragons. It is a narrative of duty, of the desperate search for legitimacy, and of the crushing reality of a war that devours the young and the brave first. We often focus on the great monarchs, the vengeful queens, and the chaotic rogues of this era. But it was Jace who held the pieces of the Black faction together when the world began to fracture. He was the diplomat who flew to the freezing north to forge alliances in the snow, the brother who grieved the loss of his kin while preparing for his own end, and the son who stood as a pillar of strength for a mother drowning in sorrow. But why does his story resonate so deeply with us, centuries after the last dragonbone turned to dust? Perhaps it is because Jace represents the what-if of Westerosi history. What if the most capable, level-headed, and honorable prince of his generation had survived the Battle of the Gullet? Would the dance have ended differently? Would the dragons have been saved from their slow march toward extinction? Or was Jace Alzys a sacrificial lamb, a figure of purity, destined to be extinguished by the very fires of ambition and greed that fueled his family's civil war? To understand Jace, we must look beyond the official histories written by maesters. We must look at the boy who was born into a storm of controversy. From the moment he drew his first breath in the year U-112 after Aegon's conquest, Jasaerous was a target. With his brown hair and his sturdy frame, he did not look like the silver-haired Valyrians of legend. The whispers of bastardy followed him like a shadow, a persistent hum of strong, strong, strong that echoed through the halls of the Red Keep. Every accomplishment he achieved, every dragon flight he mastered, and every word he spoke was a silent rebuttal to those who claimed he had no right to his name. He didn't just have to be a prince, he had to be the perfect prince. He had to be more Targaryen than the Targaryens and more Velaryon than the Velaryons. This internal struggle forged a character of rare steel. While his rivals were consumed by petty grievances and the pursuit of hedonistic pleasures, Jace was studying the maps of the 7 kingdoms, learning the lineages of the great houses, and bonding with his dragon, Vermax. Their connection was more than just that of a rider and a beast. It was a symbol of his worthiness. When that dragon egg hatched in his cradle, it was the ultimate proof that the gods, or at least the magic of old Valyria, recognized him as a true dragon lord, regardless of what the gossips in the capital might say. As we journey through his life tonight, we will explore the pivotal moments that defined his short but impactful tenure, as the Prince of Dragonstone. We will travel with him to the Eyrie and to Winterfell, where he secured the Pact of Ice and Fire, and a treaty that would echo through the ages and eventually play a role in the salvation of the realm hundreds of years later. We will examine the mystery of his rumored marriage to Sara Snow, a tale of love and duty hidden beneath the northern snows. And finally, we will descend into the chaos of the Battle of the Gullet, a naval engagement of such scale and ferocity that it changed the naval landscape of the Narrow Sea forever. The tragedy of Jasaerous is not just that he died, but that he died at the very moment his leadership was most needed. He was the bridge between the old world of King Viserys and the new, brutal world of the Dance. He was the architect of the Sowing of the Seeds, a desperate and brilliant plan to find riders for the unclaimed dragons, a move that showed his pragmatic brilliance, but also his willingness to gamble with the very soul of his house. So, let the sound of the waves and the distant roar of dragons guide you as we peel back the layers of this young man's life. We will look at the political chess matches, the family betrayals, and the quiet moments of reflection on the cliffs of Dragonstone. We will ask ourselves what it means to be a hero in a world that rewards cruelty, and what remains of a legacy when it is swallowed by the sea. The Prince of Dragonstone was a boy of fire and salt, a leader who earned his crown through action rather than birthright alone. His story is a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of history, there are lights that burn bright, however briefly, before the darkness returns. As the candles flicker and the night deepens, we begin our descent into the year 129, the year the world broke, and the year Jacaerys Velaryon stepped out of the shadow of his mother to become the man the realm needed, only to be lost to the depths of the ocean he was named to rule. This is the chronicle of the prince who should have been king, the rider of Vermax, and the tragic heart of the House of the Dragon. To truly grasp the weight of Jacaerys' life, we must first immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of his upbringing. Imagine the Red Keep during the later years of King Viserys I. It was a place of superficial peace, a gilded cage where the cracks were being covered with tapestries and wine. Jace grew up in the middle of a cold war between his mother, Princess Rhaenyra, and Queen Alicent Hightower. Every holiday, every feast, and every training session in the yard was a battlefield. He saw the way the court looked at him and his brothers Lucerys and Joffrey. He saw the smirks of Aemond and Aegon, his uncles, who were not much older than himself, but were already steeped in the resentment of their mother. Think of the discipline it took for a young boy to maintain his composure when his legitimacy was questioned to his face. There is a famous story of a feast where Aemon Targaryen toasted to his strong nephews, a double entendre that cut deeper than any blade. While a lesser person might have lashed out in a way that ruined their reputation, Jace learned to channel that fire into his duties. He became a scholar of the realm. He understood that power is not just about who sits on the throne, but about who the lords of the realm trust to lead them when the winter comes. When the news reached Dragonstone that King Viserys had died, and that Aegon II had been crowned in the dragon pit, the time for lessons was over. The boy had to become a man overnight. While Rhaenyra was incapacitated by the physical and emotional trauma of a difficult labor and the betrayal of her father's wishes, it was Jace who stood among the lords on the Black Council. He was the one who proposed the diplomatic missions that would secure their cause. He didn't suggest burning the city or raining dragonfire on his kin immediately. He suggested words. He suggested alliances. He understood that a queen without the support of the great houses is merely a rebel with a dragon, His flight to the north is the stuff of legend. Flying Vermax over the wall, seeing the vast, frozen expanse of the Stark's domain, Jace was a figure of awe to the Northerners. He found a kindred spirit in Cregan Stark, the Lord of Winterfell. Both were young men, burdened by heavy responsibilities. Both were fiercely loyal to their families, and both understood the value of an oath. The Pact of Ice and Fire was not just a political agreement. It was a bond of brotherhood. There are those who say Jace fell in love in the north, that he found a brief moment of peace in the arms of a woman named Sara Snow, away from the expectations of the crown. Whether this is true or a romantic invention of the singers, it adds a layer of humanity to a prince who was always so composed. But the war would not allow for peace. The death of his younger brother, Lucerys, at the hands of Aemond and Vhagar over Shipbreaker Bay, changed Jace. The grief must have been a physical weight, a coldness that no dragon's breath could warm. Yet, even in his mourning, he remained the strategist. He knew that the Blacks needed more dragons. He knew that the horde of wild and riderless dragons on Dragonstones was their greatest untapped resource. This led to the Sowing, a controversial and dangerous event where he invited those of Valyrian descent, the Dragonseeds, to claim a mount. It was a move of pure desperation and pure genius, one that brought commoners into the high-stakes game of dragon warfare. The Battle of the Gullet, however, remains the dark centerpiece of his story. It was one of the bloodiest naval battles in history, a collision of the Triarchy's massive fleet and the Velaryon navy. Jace flew Vermax into the heart of the storm. Imagine the smoke, the screams of dying men, the smell of burning timber and salt, and the sight of a dragon weaving through the masts of 100 ships. Vermax was young and fast, but even a dragon is vulnerable when surrounded by the concentrated fire of 1,000 crossbows and scorpions. The moment of the fall is something that has been recounted in a dozen different ways. Some say Vermax was blinded by a bolt. Others say he flew too low and was snagged by the rigging of a sinking galley. But the result was the same. The dragon crashed into the sea, and Jace, the prince who had spent his life trying to rise above the whispers and the weight of his name, was thrown into the water. He didn't die from the fall. He emerged from the waves, clinging to the wreckage of a ship, only to be found by the Myrish crossbowmen. In his final moments, he was not a dragon rider or an heir, he was a target. He was shot down in the water, his blood mingling with the salt of the sea he was supposed to inherit. His death was the beginning of the end for the Blacks' stability. Without Jace to balance Rhaenyra's growing paranoia and grief, the cause began to fray. He was the glue. He was the future. When he sank beneath the waves, the hope of a peaceful or prosperous reign for his mother sank with him. Tonight, we will take our time. We will look at the maps of the Gullet. We will read the letters sent to the Eyrie, and we will imagine the conversations held in the dark corners of Dragonstone. We will honor the memory of a prince who was perhaps too good for the world he was born into. A prince who was a Velaryon by law, a Targaryen by blood, and a hero by choice. As you settle into your pillows and the world outside fades away, let the story of Jacaerys Velaryon be a companion to your dreams. It is a story of great heights and deep waters, of fire and ice, and of a young man who gave everything he had to a crown he would never wear. We start at the beginning, in the halls of the Red Keep, where a king's love and a queen's ambition set the stage for a tragedy that the sea would eventually claim as its own. The year is 112 after the conquest. A child is born. The bells of King's Landing ring out, but in the shadows, the knives are already being sharpened. This is the life of Jasaerous, the Prince of the Waves, the rider of the Green Dragon, the lost heir of House Targaryen. Let us begin. In the annals of Westerosi history, few names carry the weight of what might have been quite like Jacaerys Velaryon. He was the prince who should have been king, the eldest son of Rhaenyra Targaryen, and the heir to the Iron Throne during the most devastating civil war the realm had ever known. But history does not remember him as a king. It remembers him as a boy, barely 15 years old, who died in the cold salt spray of the narrow sea, his life cut short before he could ever truly begin. To understand Jasaerous, you must first understand the world that shaped him. He was born in the year 112 after Aegon's conquest on the island fortress of Dragonstone. This was no ordinary castle. Dragonstone was a place of fire and shadow, carved from volcanic rock by the hands of the Valyrian freehold centuries before the Doom. Its walls were black and jagged, its towers twisted into shapes that seemed to defy reason, and its great hall was lit by torches that burned with a strange, perpetual flame. It was a place that reminded every Targaryen who walked its corridors of their heritage, of the blood of the dragon that flowed through their veins, and of the power that had once commanded the skies themselves. For young Jasaerous, Dragonstone was not just a home, it was a crucible. From his earliest days, he was surrounded by the weight of the Targaryen legacy, by the knowledge that he was being groomed for something far greater than mere lordship. His mother, Rhaenyra, had been named heir to the Iron Throne by her father, King Viserys I, and that meant Jasaerous was the heir to the heir. He was the future of the dynasty, the boy who would one day sit on the throne of the conqueror and rule over the 7 kingdoms. But even as a child, he could feel the cracks forming in that foundation. The question of his legitimacy was a whisper that followed him everywhere. Officially, Jasaerous was the son of Ser Laenor Velaryon, a knight of noble bearing and impeccable lineage. But the realm knew the truth, or at least, it believed it knew. His mother's affections had long been tied to Sir Harwin Strong, the captain of the City Watch, a man of immense physical strength and humble birth. And Jasaerous, along with his brothers Lucerys and Joffrey, bore the unmistakable features of House Strong. They had the brown hair, the strong jaw, the sturdy build that marked them as separate from the silver-haired, purple-eyed Targaryens of old. The Greens, the faction that supported Queen Alicent Hightower and her son Aegon II, used this as their sharpest weapon. They called him a bastard in the halls of power, a child of sin, a prince with no true claim to the throne. But King Viserys would not hear it. He had decreed, with the full force of his royal authority, that Jasaerous was legitimate. He was the son of Laenor Velaryon, and that was the end of the matter. The king had even made his lords and ladies swear oaths upon the 7-pointed star, swearing to recognize Rhaenyra as his heir and her children as her rightful successors. But oaths, as the Dance of the Dragons would prove, were often as fragile as parchment in the rain. Jasaerous grew up in this atmosphere of simmering tension. He learned to read the faces of the courtiers, to sense the unspoken accusations that hung in the air like smoke. And he learned to channel his anger into duty. He was a serious child, described by those who knew him as handsome and good-natured, but also deeply intelligent and fiercely loyal. He understood that his mother's cause was his cause, and that the legitimacy of her reign rested on his shoulders. He trained with the swords, he studied the histories of the great houses, and he learned to ride his dragon. That dragon was Vermax. As an infant, Jacaerys had been given a dragon egg by royal decree, a tradition that had been kept by the Targaryens since the days of old Valyria. The egg had hatched, and from its shell had emerged a young dragon of vibrant green and bronze, with sharp eyes and a temperament that matched its rider. Vermax was not the largest of dragons, not yet, but he was fast and he was fierce. He grew alongside Jasaerous, and the bond between them was forged in the fires of Dragonstone's volcanic heart. When Jasaerous flew, he felt the wind in his hair and the power of his ancestors beneath him. He was, for those brief moments, free from the weight of the whispers. When King Viserys finally died, in the year 129 after Aegon's conquest, the realm did not wait for the mourning to end. The king had passed in his sleep, and before the sun had risen, Queen Alicent and her supporters had crowned Aegon the second in the Red Keep. They had done it in secret, in the dead of night, with only a handful of witnesses. The news reached Dragonstone like a thunderbolt. Rhaenyra was declared Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, and her court on Dragonstone became the Black Council. It was there that Jasaerous, now 14 years old, took his first true step into the role he had been born for. He was named Prince of Dragonstone, the heir to the Iron Throne, and his mother's most trusted advisor. She did not send him to fight, not yet. She sent him to speak. Jacaerys became the voice of the Black Cause, a diplomat riding across the realm on Vermax's back, seeking alliances, forging pacts, and pleading with the great houses to honor their oaths. He flew to the north, to Winterfell, where he met with Lord Cregan Stark. He spoke of honor and duty, of the promises made to his mother, and of the blood that would be spilled if the realm did not stand united. It was there, in the cold halls of the north, that he made the Pact of Ice and Fire, a marriage alliance between House Targaryen and House Stark that would bind their fates for generations to come. Some say he even married a northern woman named Sara Snow, though the truth of that story is lost to the mists of time. But while Jacaerys was building alliances, the war was building its own momentum. The Greens had their own dragons, their own armies, and their own ambitions. And the narrow sea, the body of water that separated Dragonstone from the rest of the realm, became the stage for the conflict's most devastating chapter. The Battle of the Gullet was not a single clash, but a series of engagements, a naval campaign that would decide the fate of the war. The Black Fleet, commanded by Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake, was a formidable force. But the Greens had hired the Triarchy, a coalition of pirates and mercenaries from the free cities of Essos, and they had brought their own ships and their own archers. Jacaerys was not supposed to be there. He was the heir, the future king, and his mother had forbidden him from taking to the skies in combat. But when the battle began, when the ships of the Black Fleet were surrounded, and the dragons of the Greens began to descend, he could not stay on the ground. He mounted Vermax and flew into the chaos. The sky above the Gullet was a storm of fire and smoke, of dragons roaring and men screaming. Jacaerys saw his brother Lucerys fall, saw the dragon Arax torn apart by the jaws of Vhagar, the largest dragon in the world. He saw the horror of the war, the cost of the crown, and he did not turn away. It was in that chaos that Vermax was struck. A volley of arrows, fired from the ships of the Triarchy, found the dragon's wing. The beast faltered. Its flight became erratic, and Jacaerys, still clinging to its back, tried to guide it down. But the fall was too fast, the water too cold, and the archers too relentless. Vermax crashed into the sea, and Jacaerys was thrown from the saddle. He tried to swim, tried to reach the shore, but the crossbowmen had not finished their work. Arrows pierced his back, his shoulders, his chest. He was 15 years old when he sank beneath the waves, his body lost to the deep, his dragon lost with him. The news of his death reached Dragonstone like a knife through the heart of the Black cause. Rhaenyra, already grieving the loss of her father, her husband, and her younger son, now had to mourn the loss of her firstborn, her heir, the boy who should have been king. The war would continue, but it would never be the same. Jacaerys had been the hope of the future, the symbol of a dynasty that could still be saved. Without him, the Black cause grew bitter, desperate, and ultimately doomed. And so we are left with the story of a prince who never wore a crown, who never sat a throne, who never ruled a kingdom. He was a boy of 15, born into a world of fire and blood, raised on the black stone of Dragonstone, and lost to the cold sea that had once been his home. His legacy is not one of victory, but of what might have been. He was the prince who should have been king, and in the annals of Westerosi history, that is the most tragic title of all. But before we close this chapter, there is another story that must be told. It is the story of his birth, of the shadows that surrounded his first moments, and of the secrets that would shape his entire life. That story begins in the year 112 after Aegon's conquest, on Dragonstone, in a chamber lit by torchlight and guarded by the weight of prophecy. It is the story of a birth shrouded in shadow, and it is a tale we will explore in the next chapter. The previous chapter introduced us to the world of Jacaerys Velaryon, the prince who should have been king, and the weight of his Targaryen legacy on the windswept shores of Dragonstone. But to understand the tragedy of Jace, we must first go back to the very beginning, to the moment of his birth, which was not a celebration, but a shadow cast across the realm. In the year 112 after Aegon's conquest, the Red Keep of King's Landing was a place of hushed anticipation. Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, the realm's delight, was nearing the end of her first pregnancy. She was but a young woman, barely 17, and the weight of the crown she was destined to inherit pressed heavily upon her. The birth of her first child was not merely a personal joy. It was a political necessity. It was the securing of a dynasty, the proof that the line of Viserys I would continue. Yet, even before the child drew its first breath, the whispers had begun. They were not the gentle murmurs of well-wishers, but the sharp, venomous tongues of the court. The whispers were about the father. Rhaenyra's husband was Ser Laenor Velaryon, a man of noble blood and ancient lineage, the son of the sea snake himself. But Laenor was a man who preferred the company of his own sex, a fact known to all who cared to look. The marriage was a political arrangement, a union of dragon and sea, and it was a union that produced no heat, only a cold, formal duty. So when the time came for Rhaenyra to be confined to her chambers, the whispers grew louder. They spoke of a different father, a man of immense physical strength and a reputation for other things. That man was Sir Harwin Strong, the commander of the city Wajach, a man who had been a constant presence at Rhaenyra's side. He was her shield, her protector, and some said her lover. And then the child was born, a boy, a healthy, squalling boy with a shock of dark hair and a strong, lusty cry. They named him Jasaerous, a name of old Valyrian origin, a name that echoed with the power of dragons. But as the maesters laid the babe in his mother's arms, the court looked upon him, and they saw the truth, or at least the truth they wanted to see. The child did not have the silver gold hair of the Targaryens. He did not have the pale, almost ethereal features of his supposed father, Ser Laenor. Instead, Jacaerys Velaryon, the firstborn son of the heir to the Iron Throne, had the dark hair and the strong, broad features of the man from the Riverlands. He looked like a Strong. He looked like Harwin. This was the birth shrouded in shadow. The physical contrast between the infant prince and his legal father was a stark, undeniable fact. Sir Laenor Velaryon was a man of Valyrian features, with a slender build and a quiet, almost melancholic demeanor. He was a man of the sea, of the salt, and the spray, but his son, Jasaerous, was a boy of the earth, of the deep forests, and the strong, sturdy stock of the riverlands. It was a difference that could not be hidden, a difference that was be-whispered about in every corner of the realm. And those whispers, those rumors of strong blood, became a weapon. They were not just idle gossip. They were a political tool, a dagger forged in the fires of the Green faction. The Queen's stepmother, Alicent Hightower, and her father, the Hand of the King, Sir Otto Hightower, saw the opportunity. They saw the vulnerability. If the heir to the Iron Throne was a bastard, then her claim was a lie. And if her claim was a lie, then the true king was their own Aegon, the second of that name. The rumors of strong blood were not just a stain on Rhaenyra's honor. They were a crack in the very foundation of the Targaryen dynasty. They were a challenge to the legitimacy of every child Rhaenyra would ever bear. And they were a justification for the war that would come. The Greens would use this. They would use it to crown their own king, and they would use it to tear the realm apart. But for now, the babe was just a babe. He was a prince, a son, a child to be loved. He was Jacaerys, and he was the future. The whispers would follow him, but he would not hear them. Not yet. He would grow, he would learn, and he would become a dragon in his own right. But the shadow of his birth would never truly leave him. It would be the mark of his tragedy, the whisper that would follow him to his grave. And this is where the story of Jacaerys Velaryon truly begins, not in the light of a triumphant birth, but in the darkness of a whispered doubt. It is a story that will lead us to the king's decree, a moment where the crown itself would be forced to choose between truth and power, and where the fate of the realm would be sealed. And this is where the whispers met the wall of the crown. King Viserys I was not a warrior king. He did not wield a sword or lead armies. His strength lay in his stubborn, desperate love for his family, and his unwavering belief in the prophecy of the Song of Ice and Fire. When the allegations against his grandson reached a fever pitch in the Red Keep, he knew that soft words would not be enough. He had to act with the absolute authority of the Iron Throne. King Viserys I's unwavering defense of Jacaerys' legitimacy against Alicent's accusations was a defining moment of his reign. He did not just rebuke the whispers in private. He stood before the Iron Throne, a man devoured by illness, but still burning with purpose. And he declared the boy true-born before the entire court. He silenced the Hightowers and their faction with the full weight of his royal word. But he knew, as a student of history, that words could be forgotten. He needed a symbol that the realm could not deny. He needed the fire itself to render its judgment. This is why the royal decree that placed a dragon egg in Jacaerys' cradle to prove his Targaryen essence was the most profound statement a Targaryen king could make. It was a gamble staked on blood and magic. The egg was not just any egg. It was a relic of old Valyria, a vessel of potential fire and fury, taken from the cradle of the family's ancestral dragons on Dragonstone. By placing it in the crib of the infant prince, Viserys was doing more than offering a gift. He was submitting the boy's claim to the dragons themselves. In the culture of the Targaryens, a dragon egg that hatched was the ultimate seal of legitimacy. It was the universe, or the gods of old Valyria, declaring the child worthy. It was the king's final, unassailable argument against the politics of the Green Council. He was telling the realm, let the fire decide. And so a tense quiet fell over the royal nursery. For months, the egg sat there, cold and smooth, its stone-like shell a silent rebuke to the hopes of Rhaenyra and a nervously vigilant king. The tension within the Red Keep as the young prince grew up under a cloud of suspicion was a poison that seeped into every stone of that ancient fortress. You could feel it in the way the servants averted their eyes. You could hear it in the clipped, polite day's tones of Alicent Hightower, who watched the child with a scrutiny that bordered on obsession. Jace was a living accusation against her own ambition for her sons. He was the obstacle that denied her Aegon the throne. Every time the boy laughed in the gardens, every time he took his first steps, the court held its breath, waiting for the egg to crack or to remain forever silent. If it remained silent, if the fire inside never stirred, the legitimacy of the heir would be forever in doubt, a chink in the armor of the Black faction that the Greens could exploit for generations. But the king watched. He visited the cradle more often than the maesters thought wise. He refused to allow the egg to be moved, refusing even the suggestion that it be replaced with another. He gambled the entire future of his dynasty on that singular egg. He saw in Jasaerous not the hair of a strong or the face of a Velaryon, but the future. He saw a dragon rider who might one day save the world from the winter he had seen in his dreams. Viserys was a man haunted by prophecy, and his love for Rhaenyra and for her son was filtered through that lens. Every taunt from the court, every sidelong glance from Alicent only made him cling harder to the decree. He could not change the boy's biology, but he could change the law of the land. He could wrap the child in the banners and fire of House Targaryen until the world accepted it. He was fighting a war of perception with a stubbornness that baffled his small council. Inside Maegor's holdfast, Rhaenyra was raising her son in a bubble of fierce love and careful isolation. She was determined that Jace would be stronger than the Whispers. She taught him the histories of their house, the names of the dragons, the weight of the crown he was destined to wear. She told him he was a dragon, and that a dragon could not be hurt by the words of vipers. But every night, as she tucked him into his bed beneath the carved stone ceilings, she would look at the egg in the cradle by his side. It was the stone heart of their hope. The tension was unrelenting. It was the constant hum of a blade being sharpened in the dark. The Greens waited for the failure. The Blacks prayed for the fire. Viserys' health continued its slow, painful decline. His body was a map of decay, but his mind clung to the future with a desperate clarity. He held court as often as he could, forcing his failing body into the intimidating presence of the Iron Throne. He did this specifically to remind the realm who sat at its head. He used every audience, every public appearance to reaffirm Rhaenyra's position and the legitimacy of her son. He was building a wall of royal precedent against the coming storm. He knew that once he was gone, the storm would break, but he was determined to make sure that when it did, Jasaerous would stand on the firmest ground a king could provide. And then the fire answered. One quiet morning on Dragonstone, far from the clutching fingers of the Red Keep, the shell began to crack. The noises that came from the cradle were not the sounds of a normal animal. They were the hisses of compressed steam, the clicks of magma cooling. The egg of jade and cream split open, and a creature emerged that would change the course of the war. Vermax entered the world. He was small, with scales of bright emerald and wings of a pale membranous gold. He was hungry and fierce, and he immediately bonded to the boy. Jacaerys Velaryon had been chosen by a dragon. The king's decree, the royal gamble, had paid off. In that moment, the cloud of suspicion did not vanish entirely, but it was burned back by a truth that could not be ignored. The dragon did not care about the politics of the Red Keep. The dragon only knew its rider. The proof of the king's decree was alive, breathing fire, and growing stronger every day. The bond between Jace and Vermax was the foundation upon which Jasaerous would build his legacy, a legacy that would soon deem Tuz from the safety of Dragonstone into the very heart of the war. The hatching was the ignition, and the story of that bond is the story of what made him a prince worthy of the crown. This was Chapter 3. Up next is Chapter 4, Vermax, the hatching of a destiny. Chapter 4, Vermax. The hatching of a destiny. King Viserys I had made his position absolutely clear before the entire court. When Alicent Hightower dared to question the legitimacy of Rhaenyra's children, the king did not simply dismiss her concerns with a wave of his hand. He rose from the Iron Throne with a fury that made the courtiers tremble, and he declared that anyone who repeated those slanders would lose the tongue that spoke them. But the king understood something deeper than mere threats. He understood that in the world of dragons and prophecy, there was only one way to silence the whispers forever. And so, with his own hands, he placed a dragon egg in the cradle of his firstborn grandchild. This was no ordinary egg. It came from the clutch of Syrax herself, Rhaenyra's golden queen of the skies. The shell was a deep green, almost black in certain lights, with veins of gold running through it like rivers of fire waiting to be unleashed. The court watched with bated breath as the egg rested in the cradle beside the infant prince, and the waiting began. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The child grew stronger, his lungs filling with the salt air of Dragonstone, and still the egg remained cold and still. But then, on a night when the moon hung low and heavy over the narrow sea, something changed. The egg began to warm. The servants noticed it first, a strange heat radiating from the nursery that made the candles flicker and dance. The guards stationed outside the prince's chambers felt it too, a pressure in the air that made their skin prickle with anticipation. And then, in the quiet hours before dawn, the shell cracked. The moment the dragon egg hatched, bonding Jacaerys to the creature he would name Vermax, was a moment that would echo through the halls of history. The dragonet emerged, not with a whimper, but with a screech that pierced the stone walls of Dragonstone. His scales were the color of fresh spring leaves, a vibrant green that seemed to glow in the torchlight. His eyes, when they opened for the first time, were the color of molten gold, and they fixed immediately on the small face of the boy who would be his rider for life. Vermax was small at first, no larger than a cat, with wings that seemed too delicate to ever carry him through the skies. But he grew with a speed that surprised even the dragon keepers. Within a year, he was large enough to bear the weight of a child on his back. Within 2, he was flying circles around the towers of Dragonstone, his green scales catching the sunlight in a way that made him look like a living emerald against the gray stone. And as Vermax grew, so too did Jacaerys. The bond between dragon and rider is not something that can be taught or learned from books. It is forged in the fire of shared experience, in the moments of trust and fear and triumph that define a life. Jace learned to read the moods of his dragon, to understand when Vermax was hungry or restless or simply in need of the warmth of his presence. He learned to speak to him in the ancient tongue of Valyria, the words rolling off his tongue with a natural grace that made the courtiers wonder if perhaps the rumors of his parentage were wrong after all. For that was the true significance of what had happened. A bastard, as the Greens so cruelly called him, had successfully claimed a dragon. The whispers in the court had been relentless. How could a child of strong blood, of that coarse and common stock, possibly bond with a creature as noble and ancient as a dragon? The Targaryen bloodline was pure, they said, and only the pure could ride the beasts of fire and blood. But Vermax had chosen Jace. The dragon had looked into the eyes of the infant prince and had seen something there that no amount of slander could erase. He had seen the fire of the dragon, the blood of the conquerors, the legacy of Aegon the dragon himself. The significance of a bastard successfully claiming a dragon in the eyes of the court was not lost on anyone who witnessed it. The lords and ladies who had gathered to pay their respects to the new prince of Dragonstone watched in silence as the young boy and his dragon grew together. They watched as Jace learned to ride, his small hands gripping the saddle with a confidence that belied his youth. They watched as Vermax responded to his commands, the dragon's head turning to follow every word that fell from the boy's lips. And in that watching, something shifted. The whispers did not stop, but they changed. They became quieter, more hesitant, as if the speakers themselves were beginning to doubt the truth of their own words. For if Jace were truly a bastard, if he were truly without the blood of the dragon, then how could this have happened? How could a dragon egg have hatched for him? How could the creature have bonded so completely, so perfectly, to a child who was not of the true line? These were questions that had no easy answers, and the court knew it. The Greens could whisper all they wanted, could spread their rumors and their lies, but they could not deny what they saw with their own eyes. Jace was a dragon rider, Vermax was his dragon, and the bond between them was as real and as unbreakable as the bond between any Targaryen prince and his mount. As Jace grew older, his responsibilities grew with him. He was not just a prince in name, but a prince in training, groomed for the day when he would sit the Iron Throne and rule the 7 kingdoms. His mother, Rhaenyra, taught him the art of diplomacy, the careful dance of words and promises that could win a war before a single sword was drawn. His father, Jacaerys Velaryon, taught him the ways of the sea, the currents and tides that would one day carry him to battle. And Vermax taught him something else entirely. The dragon taught him the meaning of power, the weight of the fire that burned within him, the responsibility that came with being one of the few people in the world who could command a creature of such immense and terrible beauty. The years passed, and the shadow of the coming conflict grew longer. King Jasaerys I grew older, his body failing him in ways that his iron will could no longer compensate for. The factions at court grew more entrenched, more desperate, more willing to spill blood for the prize of the crown. And Jace, still so young, found himself caught in the middle of a storm that had been brewing since before he was born. But for now, in these early years, there was only the bond. There was only the boy and his dragon, growing together, learning together, preparing for a future that neither of them could fully understand. Vermax would one day be a formidable weapon in the war to come, a dragon whose green scales would be remembered in song and story for generations. But in these quiet moments, he was simply Jace's companion, his confidant, his friend, and that is where we will leave him for now. With the wind in his hair and the world at his feet, a young prince on the cusp of a destiny that would shape the course of history. In our next chapter, we will explore the halls of the Red Keep and the childhood that shaped the man Jace would become. But for tonight, let the image of that first flight, that first moment of trust between a boy and his dragon, carry you into the quiet of the night. The bond between Jacaerys Velaryon and his dragon Vermax was not merely a thing of fire and blood. It was a mirror, a reflection of the prince's own growth from a babe in the cradle to a young man who would one day bear the weight of a kingdom. As Vermax grew, his horns curving and his scales darkening to a deep forest green, so too did Jace's understanding of his place in the world expand. The Red Keep, that ancient and sprawling fortress of Aegon the Conqueror, became the stage for this early education. It was a place of stone and shadow, of whispered secrets and clashing ambitions. And it was here that the prince who should have been king learned his first, most crucial lessons. The early education of a prince is a rigorous affair, and for Jasaerous it was a tapestry woven from 3 distinct threads. The first was history, the long and bloody chronicle of House Targaryen. Maesters would sit with him in the library, their voices dry as dust, as they recited the names of the old kings: Aegon the Conqueror, Maegor the Cruel, Jaehaerys the Wise. They spoke of the doom of Valyria, of the dragon lords who had fled the fall, and of the great and terrible power that had been their birthright. Jace listened, but he did not simply hear. He understood that his name, Velaryon, was a bridge between 2 worlds, the sea and the sky, the salt of Driftmark and the fire of Dragonstone. This history was not a dead thing. It was a living warning, a map of the mistakes he must not make. The second thread was combat. In the training yards of the Red Keep, Jace learned to hold a sword. His arms ached, his palms blistered, but he did not complain. He was a prince, and a prince does not whine. His instructors were men of the Kingsguard, their white cloaks pristine, their oaths unbreakable. They taught him the forms of the West, the footwork of the Reach, and the raw brutality of a shield wall. But more than the steel, they taught him the lesson of the body. To be a leader, he must be strong. To be a king, he must be able to defend his throne. And in the dirt and the sweat, he found a strange kind of peace. It was a simple truth that a sword in the hand was a problem with a solution. The third thread was the most subtle and the most important. It was the Valyrian tongue, the language of his ancestors. High Valyrian, with its rolling consonants and its ancient grammar, was not a language for common speech. It was a language for commands, for spells, for the binding of dragons. Jace learned it from his mother, Rhaenyra, who would speak to him in the old words when they were alone. She would tell him the names of the stars, the songs of the old gods, and the secrets of the blood. It was a gift, a connection to a world that had been lost. And it was a weapon, for when he sat upon the Iron Throne, he would speak to the lords of Westeros in a tongue they could not understand, a reminder of the fire that ran in his veins. But these lessons, these threads of history and combat and language, were not learned in isolation. Jace was not alone in the Red Keep. He had brothers, Lucerys and Joffrey, 2 boys who followed him like shadows. Lucerys was the younger, his hair a dark mop, his eyes full of a gentle curiosity. Joffrey was the smallest, a child of only a few years who still clung to his mother's skirts. And Jace, the eldest, the heir, the prince, became their protector. He was the shield between them and the world. When Lucerys was teased for his small size, Jace would step forward. When Joffrey was frightened by the shadows in the hall, Jace would hold his hand. It was a role he did not ask for, but one he accepted without question. A prince is a brother first, he learned. A king is a protector second. This bond, this fierce and protective love, was not just a matter of family. It was a matter of survival. For in the Red Keep, there were other children, other sons, and they were not friends. The sons of Alicent Hightower, Aegon, Aemond, and Daeron were a different breed. Aegon was the eldest, a boy who had been given everything and had learned to appreciate nothing. He was lazy, cruel, and fond of the bottle. Aemond was the second, a boy of sharp edges and sharper ambitions. He had a hunger in his eyes, a hunger for power, for respect, for a dragon of his own. And Daeron was the youngest, a child who had not yet learned to hate. The simmering resentment between these two groups of boys was a fire that needed no kindling. It was a fact of the Red Keep, a tension that hung in the air like the smell of smoke. The children of Rhaenyra and the children of Alicent were not enemies by birth. They were enemies by circumstance, by the whispers of their mothers, by the weight of the crown that sat upon their father's brow. Jace saw it in Aegon's sneer. He heard it in Aemon's taunts. He felt it in the way the court would look at him, and then look at his brothers, and then look away. They were the bastards, the strong boys, the sons of a whore, and they were the heirs. This resentment, this slow and simmering hatred, was not a thing of open conflict. Not yet. It was a thing of small cruelties. Aegon would trip Lucerys in the hall. Aemond would mock Joffrey's name. Jace would stand between them, his jaw set, his fists clenched. He would not fight. He was a prince, and a prince does not brawl in the corridors. But he would remember. He would remember every slight, every insult, every time his brothers were made to feel small, and he would wait. For the day would come, he knew, when the words would be replaced by swords. And on that day, he would be ready. The early education of a prince is a thing of many parts. But the most important part, the part that cannot be taught by maesters or swordsmen, is the lesson of the heart. Jace learned that lesson in the Red Keep, in the shadows of the throne, in the eyes of his brothers. He learned that to be a king is to be a protector, to be a leader is to be a shield, and to be a brother is to be a promise. A promise that no matter what the world may say, no matter what the whispers may claim, he will stand by them. He will fight for them. He will die for them. This is the story of Jacaerys Velaryon, the prince who was raised in the shadow of a war he did not start. And as we look back upon these years, these quiet years in the Red Keep, the seeds of a rivalry that would one day consume a kingdom, the seeds of a conflict that would be known as the Dance of the Dragons. And in the next chapter, we will explore the first spark of that conflict, a tale of a pink dread and a stolen eye, a story that would forever change the course of Jace's life. Jace is learning the histories of the great houses, but the most pressing history being written is the one unfolding in the halls around him. Every lesson in combat sharpens a blade that may one day be turned against the blood of his mother. Every Valyrian word he masters is a declaration of an identity the realm questions. The Red Keep is a school of dead languages, but the true language being spoken is that of suspicion. Jace attempts to be good-natured. He reaches out. He tries to bridge the gap between the two branches of the family. He is the heir, after all. He feels the burden of diplomacy, even at an age where such burdens should not exist. But in the eyes of the Greens, he is not the heir. He is the embodiment of a usurpation that has yet to happen. He is an intruder in a palace that has belonged to his family for centuries, and yet somehow they treat him as a stranger whose welcome has worn thin. This underlying tension finds a cruel breaking point in what would become known as the Pink Dread. It is a prank, yes, but it is a prank with teeth. Aemon Targaryen, the second son of Alicent Hightower, has no dragon. This is a profound shame in a family that bonds with beasts of legend as a rite of passage. Aegon, the elder brother, torments him for it. One day, they bring Aemond a pig, grotesquely butchered and slathered in pink. They tie wings to it. They call it the Pink Dread, a mock dragon for a mock prince. Where does Jace stand in this? Accounts place him and Lucerys in the company of Aegon, perhaps onlookers, perhaps participants in the laughter. It is a moment of terrible miscalculation. For Aemond, it is not a joke from a rival cousin. It is a declaration of war from a bastard who dares to mock a true-born son of the king. The laughter in that courtyard does not fade over the years. It echoes. It hardens into something cold and unyielding in Aemon's heart. It is the day the enmity was no longer a quiet ember. It was a flame. For Jace, the psychological toll is different. He sees the hatred in Aemon's eye. He understands, perhaps for the first time, the depth of the chasm. It is not a Game of Thrones. It is a war of identity. He is reminded, by the very existence of Aemon's shame, that his own presence is a spark that ignites a dynastic divide. He cannot simply be a prince. He cannot simply be a boy. He is a weapon in a war he did not start, and every move he makes, every laugh he shares, cuts deeper into the family fabric. The mask of the dutiful heir is heavy, and the cracks are beginning to show. The loss of an eye, of course, would be the price demanded for that laughter. The family will gather on Driftmark, the seat of House Velaryon, for a funeral. It is a time for mourning, for healing. But in the deep of the night, under the gaze of 100 candles, a confrontation will erupt that changes everything. A blade is drawn, a child screams, and the enmity that was solidified by a pig with paper wings is sealed with a scar that runs from brow to cheek. That night, the tragedy of Driftmark would rewrite the fate of the dynasty, and Jace would find himself standing in the ruins of a childhood he never truly had. The prank that left a pig named Pink Dread, painted with wings, might have seemed harmless, even childish. But for Aemon Targaryen, the memory of being mocked for lacking a dragon etched itself into his soul alongside the laughter of the court. Jace had tried to be a peacemaker, yet the seeds of rivalry had dug deep, watered by the constant whispers of bastardry and the stark division between the queen's children and the heirs. And those seeds were destined to sprout in the most tragic of soil. The tragedy proper began not with a dragon, but with the sea. Driftmark, the seat of House Velaryon, was draped in mourning for Laena Velaryon, who had chosen a dragon's death over the agony of childbirth. The family gathered to send her off on a pyre by the shore. It was a reunion that promised no warmth, only the cold bite of the wind off the narrow sea. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken accusations. Daemon Targaryen stood as a widower once more, his grief a storm barely contained. Rhaenyra arrived with her children, Jace and his brothers, their silver gold hair, a stark challenge to those who whispered they were not true dragons. Across the funeral pyre stood the Greens, Alicent Hightower, her face a mask of pious mourning, her children, Aegon the drunken heir, Helaena the dreamer, and Aemond, still dragonless, looking on with hungry eyes. This was the funeral of Laena Velaryon, and the night that changed the family forever was only just beginning. The night air carried not just the scent of salt and burning offerings, but the heavy promise of violence. After the ceremony, the children found themselves alone in the cavernous halls of High Tide. It was a powder keg, and Aemon held the match. That night, he claimed Vogger, the largest dragon in the world, the mount of the late Laena Velaryon. It was a bold, desperate move to finally have his place in the sun. Jace, Lucerys, and Joffrey confronted him on the beach. The wind howled, drowning out the distant crash of waves. Aemon stood before the beast, drunk on the power of his new bond. And then he made his cruelest move. He called Rhaenyra's sons what everyone whispered. He called them Strongs. He mocked their lineage, their very right to sit where they stood. For Jacaerys, it was the final straw. He had spent his entire life trying to be noble, trying to be the perfect prince to silence the whispers. But inside, he was a boy whose identity was constantly under siege. Jace's involvement in the brawl that resulted in Aemon losing an eye was not the act of a schemer or a bully. It was the desperate lashing out of a cornered child. He and Lucerys fought Aemond in the sand. It was ugly, a tangle of fists and fury in the dark. And when Lucerys drew a blade, slashing Aemond's cheek and taking his eye, the screams alerted the entire court. Blood mingled with the salt spray. Jace stood over his brother, breathing hard, realizing with a dawning horror that there was no going back. The scene that followed in the Great Hall of Driftmark was perhaps more terrifying than the brawl itself. The adults arrived, their own long simmering hatreds unleashed. King Jasaerous, frail and sick, tried to command order, but he was a ghost king shouting at ghosts. Queen Alicent demanded blood, an eye for an eye. She wanted Lucerys mutilated. Rhaenyra, the protective mother, stood firm. The family's wounds would never truly heal. This was the brutal realization that dawned on everyone present. It was not just a lost eye. It was the final rupture of a dynasty. Viserys decreed an end to the matter, demanding the families reconcile, forcing them to shake hands. But the gesture was hollow. Jace watched it all. He saw his mother, the queen, being attacked. He saw his grandfather unable to hold his kingdom together. He saw the naked hatred in Alicent's eyes. It was in that moment that the family shattered. The love that was supposed to bind them was gone, replaced by a festering suspicion and a desire for revenge. Jace understood that this war, the one that would eventually claim his life, had truly begun right there on the cold stone floor of Driftmark. The king could command obedience, but he could not command forgiveness. The atmosphere in the Red Keep became poison. Every glance from the Greens was sharp as Valyrian steel. Rhaenyra knew, deep in her bones, that her children were no longer safe. So she made the decision to leave, to return to the island fortress of her birth, to raise her dragons away from the scheming and the daggers of King's Landing. The exile to Dragonstone was not just a retreat. It was the drawing of a line in the sand, a gathering of strength in the shadow of the coming storm. And for Jasaerous, it marked the end of his childhood and the beginning of his true test as a prince. The night at Driftmark had changed everything. When the sun rose over the smoking ruins of that ancient hall, the bonds between the two branches of House Targaryen had been severed, not by fire, but by blood. Jace had stood beside his mother in the aftermath, his knuckles still raw from the fight, his eyes still carrying the weight of what he had done. He had not meant to strike Aemond so hard. He had not meant for the blade to find its mark. But in the chaos of that moment, when his brother Lucerys had been cornered and threatened, something had snapped inside him. The protective instinct that had always defined Jace as the eldest brother had overridden every lesson in courtly restraint, and now the consequences would echo through the halls of the Red Keep like a storm that would not pass. Rhaenyra watched the court turn against her children in the days that followed. She saw the way the lords and ladies whispered behind their hands, the way the servants averted their eyes when Jace and his brothers walked past. She heard the rumors that spread like wildfire through the corridors, tales of the strong boys and their violent natures, tales that painted her sons as brutes rather than the frightened children they truly were. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that King's Landing had become a poison. It was a city that had once welcomed her as the realm's delight, the heir to the throne, the princess who would one day be queen. But now it had turned against her, and against her sons, and against everything she had tried to build. The decision came to Rhaenyra not as a sudden revelation, but as a slow, inevitable understanding. She could not raise her children in this place. She could not watch them grow under the shadow of Alicent's hatred, under the constant threat of Aegon and Aemon's cruelty, under the weight of a court that would never see them as anything but bastards. She could not bear to see Jace's shoulders grow heavy with the burden of defending his own name, his own blood, his own right to exist. So she made the choice that would define the next chapter of their lives. She would take her family to Dragonstone. She would leave the Red Keep behind, leave the whispers and the scheming and the poison. And she would raise her sons on the island where her own childhood had been forged in fire and salt. The journey from King's Landing to Dragonstone was not long in distance, but it felt like an age in meaning. Jace stood at the prow of the ship as the coastline of the capital faded into the mist, and he felt something lift from his chest that he had not even realized was there. It was the weight of expectation, the weight of being watched, the weight of having to prove himself worthy of a throne that would never be given to him freely. He had been a prince of the Red Keep, a boy who learned his letters in the same chambers where the great kings of old had studied their histories. A boy who trained with swords in the same yard where the finest knights of the realm had bled. But that boy was fading now, replaced by something else, something that would be shaped not by the politics of the capital, but by the raw, untamed power of the sea. Dragonstone rose from the waves like a black fang, its volcanic peaks cutting into the sky, its stone walls covered in the carvings of dragons long past. Jace had seen it before, of course, in his visits as a child, but it had never felt like home. Now, as the ship drew closer, as he watched the great hall of the castle take shape against the horizon, he understood that this was where he was meant to be. This was the fortress of his ancestors, the place where Aegon the Conqueror had first dreamed of uniting the Seven Kingdoms, the place where the Targaryen bloodline had been forged in the fires of old Valyria. And here, on this island of black stone and salt spray, Jace would learn what it truly meant to be a dragon. The years that followed were not easy, but they were transformative. Jace grew into his role as the Prince of Dragonstone, not through the lessons of maesters and courtiers, but through the harsh education of the sea. He learned to sail the waters around the island, to navigate the treacherous currents that had claimed so many ships before, to read the winds and the tides as if they were a language spoken only by the old gods of the deep. He learned to ride a Vermax, not as a prince showing off his mount in the tourney grounds, but as a warrior who would need to command the skies in the battles to come. He learned to lead, to command, to inspire, and he learned these things not from books, but from the example of his mother, who had chosen to leave everything behind for the sake of her children. The bond between Jace and Rhaenyra deepened during those years of isolation. There were no lords to impress, no queens to placate, no games of thrones to play. There was only the raw, honest relationship between a mother and her eldest son, a relationship that had been strained by the politics of the capital, but that now found its true strength in the quiet moments of Dragonstone. They would sit together in the great hall, watching the fire burn low, and Rhaenyra would tell Jace the stories of her own childhood, the stories of her father the king, the stories of the dragons that had once filled the skies of Westeros. She would tell him of the dreams she had, the dreams of a united realm, the dreams of a peace that would last for generations. And she would ask him what he saw when he looked out at the sea, and Jace would answer, not with the words of a courtier, but with the honesty of a boy who had learned to see the world as it truly was. He saw a future that would not be given to him. He saw a war that was coming, a war that would tear the realm apart, a war that would demand everything from him and from everyone he loved. And he saw that the only way to survive was to become something more than a prince. He had to become a leader, He had to become the kind of man that his mother could trust to carry her legacy forward, the kind of man that the North would follow, the kind of man that the sea itself would respect. The years on Dragonstone shaped Jace in ways that the Red Keep never could have. He learned the value of loyalty, not the loyalty that was bought with titles and lands, but the loyalty that was earned through shared hardship and mutual respect. He learned the value of patience, the patience that came from watching the tides turn, from waiting for the right moment to strike, from understanding that some battles could not be won with swords alone. And he learned the value of his own blood, the blood that ran through his veins, the blood that connected him to the dragons of old, the blood that made him, in the eyes of those who mattered, a true son of House Targaryen. But the peace of Dragonstone could not last forever. The realm was shifting, the alliances were crumbling, and the death of the king, who had held everything together, was approaching like a shadow that could not be outrun. Jace knew this even as he trained with his dragon, even as he sailed the waters of the narrow sea, even as he watched his mother grow stronger and more determined with each passing day. He knew that the time would come when he would have to leave this island, when he would have to take to the skies, when he would have to prove that the years of exile had not been wasted, that he had become the prince that his mother needed him to be. And when that time came, when the news of the king's death reached Dragonstone, when the realm was thrown into chaos, when the war that had been brewing for years finally erupted into open flame, Jace would be ready. He would be ready because of the years he had spent on this island, because of the lessons he had learned from the sea, because of the bond he had forged with his mother in the quiet moments when the world had seemed far away. He would be ready to fly, ready to fight, ready to die if that was what the gods demanded of him. But that is a story for another chapter. For now, let us leave Jace on Dragonstone, watching the horizon, waiting for the storm that he knows is coming. Let us leave him in the peace that will not last, in the quiet that will soon be broken by the roar of war. Because the next chapter of this tale will bring us to the death of the king, the death of the peace that held the realm together, and the beginning of the end for everything that Jacaerys Velaryon has ever known. The previous chapter ended with the family settling into the grim, volcanic fortress of Dragonstone. Rhaenyra had brought her children away from the gilded cage of the Red Keep, away from the whispers that followed them through every corridor. The air on Dragonstone tasted of salt and brimstone, and the constant, distant rumble of the mountain beneath their feet served as a reminder of the old power that slept in their blood. For a time, an uneasy quiet settled over their world. The boys began to train harder. The dragons grew larger. Jasaerous spent long hours studying maps of the realm, his brow furrowed in a concentration that aged him beyond his years. He knew, as they all knew, that the quiet could not last. The realm of the Seven Kingdoms was a tinderbox, and the king upon the Iron Throne was the only hand holding back the spark. But a king cannot rule forever. The news came not with a grand horn blast, but with the frantic beating of wings against the wind. A raven, black as the night it flew from, landed on Dragonstone, carrying a message that would shatter every illusion of peace. King Viserys I, the peaceful king, was dead. He had passed in his sleep within the walls of the Red Keep, surrounded by a family that had already been divided in spirit, long before his heart finally gave out. The message fell over the stone drum like a cold tide. The man who held the realm together by sheer will and the memory of a better time was gone. The anchor that kept the great ship of state from drifting into the rocks of civil war had snapped. An era of fragile peace, stretched thin by years of quiet resentment, had finally broken. The last thread binding the greens to the blacks had been severed by the silence of a king's final breath. For Jasaerous, the news struck like the first blow in a fight he had seen coming for years, but desperately hoped would never arrive. His grandfather was gone, the man who always looked at him with pride, who publicly named him heir despite the whispers of 1,000 courtiers, was dead. And with the king's death, the pretense of unity was stripped away like the mask it had always been. What happened next carved a cold fury into young Jace's heart. The Greens wasted no time observing the proper rites of mourning. As the ravens flew across the realm, spreading news of the king's passing, another darker message followed close behind. Aegon II had been crowned in the dragon pit before the king's body had even been laid to rest. The golden circlet of Jacaerys, the conciliator, the crown that had rested so easily on Viserys's brow, had been stolen from its pillow. Rhaenyra's birthright, her very name as heir to the Iron Throne, had been snatched away before the candles lit for her father had burned out. Jace's reaction was not an immediate explosion of shouting or reckless fury. It was something deeper, something far more profound. A quiet, seething storm brewed behind his eyes as he absorbed the weight of the betrayal. The theft of the crown was not just a political act of usurpation. It was a theft of honor, a violation of his mother's claim, and a deep insult to the dragon blood that ran in his own veins. In that moment, the boy who had been eager to prove himself, the playful youth of the pink dread and the courtly lessons, began to die. In his place, a warrior prince was being forged in the white-hot fire of betrayal. He watched his mother's face, seeing the grief and the rage fighting for dominion in her expression, and he made a silent vow in the stone halls of Dragonstone. He would be her sword. He would be her shield. He would never let them take anything else from her. The shift in Jacaerys Velaryon was subtle to the untrained eye, but to those who knew him best it was unmistakable. The softness of his brow, the easy, good-natured smile that had once charmed the lords of the court, they seemed to fade like smoke in a strong wind. His shoulders straightened beneath the weight of a new and terrible responsibility. He was no longer a boy studying the history of the Seven Kingdoms. He was a prince who had to write its next bloody chapter. His voice carried a new authority, a hardness that had not been there before. He was the Prince of Dragonstone, the heir to the heir, and the enemy was already seated upon his mother's throne. He began to speak of war, of strategy, of the urgent need to strike back. His gaze grew sharper, forever fixed on the horizon, where the red keep stood gleaming in the distance. The ghosts of Driftmark and the cruel whispers of his parentage could no longer distract him. All that mattered was the war that was already upon them. All that mattered was reclaiming his mother's crown. Later, in the great hall of Dragonstone, Jace stood before the painted table. His fingers traced the mountain ranges and rivers of Westeros, not as a student memorizing a lesson, but as a commander surveying a battlefield. The map was no longer just geography. It was a plan. The north, the Vale, the Riverlands, each lord a piece upon a board of bone and iron. He knew his mother would want to keep her sons safe, to wrap them in the fortress of her grief and her fierce love. But Jace understood that safety was a luxury they could no longer afford. The time for hiding was over. He looked at his brother Lucerys, seeing the same grim resolve reflected back at him from across the table. They were the sons of the dragon, and their fire had been stoked by the usurper's flame. The boy who once played in the courtyards of the Red Keep was gone. In his place stood a commander, a diplomat, and a future king. The realm would soon learn the name of Jacaerys Velaryon, not merely as a rumored strong bastard or a courtly prince, but as the dragon prince who rose from the ashes of a stolen peace. As the night deepened over the narrow sea, Rhaenyra gathered her most loyal counselors as around her. Daemon stood at her side, fire dancing in his eyes. Lord Jacaerys Velaryon spoke of the strength of their fleet and the loyalty of the tides. And Jace stood at his mother's right hand, ready to speak for the future of their house. The war had not yet begun in earnest, but the strategy was already forming. The alliances were being whispered into being across the dark water. A raven would soon fly to the north. A dragon would soon climb the giant's lance. The Green Council had struck first in King's Landing, but the Black Council was about to convene. And within that chamber of stone and shadow on Dragonstone, lit by the red glow of the dragon's hearth and the candlelight of a desperate dynasty, the fate of a kingdom would be decided by the words of princes and the fire of their ancient beasts. The peace was dead. The dance was about to begin. The news of King Viserys I's death struck Dragonstone like a wave of cold seawater. The brief era of fragile peace was shattered in an instant. Aegon II had claimed the throne in the dead of night, a direct theft of his mother's birthright, committed while the realm slept. In the great hall of Dragonstone, beneath the restless gaze of gargoyles and the wings of carved stone dragons, the Black Council convened for the first time in earnest. The painted table, that massive wooden map of all Westeros, became the stage for the opening gambit of a civil war. And in that room, a voice rose above the clamor of hardened sellswords and seasoned lords. It was the clear, firm voice of a boy just 15 years old. Jacaerys Velaryon was not present to merely sit in a cushioned chair and observe the arguments of older men. From the very first hour, he stepped into the circle of power and took an active role in the War Council. While Daemon spoke of immediate bloodshed and Lord Corsley's counseled control of the sea lanes, Jace placed his hands directly on the north, on the painted table. He understood the geography of power better than most lords, twice his age. He knew that a crown stolen in shadow needed the bright sunlight of recognition to truly hold its luster. He argued that the crown must be seen, not just claimed. The realm needed to see the face of its future king. He insisted on being more than just a figurehead in this conflict. He would not sit idle within the walls of Dragonstone while good men died for his mother's cause. He had spent his childhood defending his brothers from cruel whispers. Now he would defend the realm for its rightful queen. He stepped forward from the table and volunteered for the most dangerous missions imaginable. He offered to fly to the north, to the Eyrie, to the Twins. He would bargain with the Starks and the Arryns with his own voice. He would remind the great houses of Westeros that Rhaenyra's heir was no weak prince, that he was brave, that he was a dragon rider in full command of his beast. He argued that sending a prince showed a level of respect and desperation that a raven could never match. The lords of the realm needed to see the fire burning in his eyes. But the weight of a mother's love is heavier than any crown forged of gold. Rhaenyra knew the terrible risks of the open sky. Storm clouds could hide enemy knights. The narrow sea had swallowed Targaryen dreams before. She rose from her throne, her face pale as milk glass, her voice shaking with a quiet, terrifying resolve. She commanded that the guards bring forth the sacred text. The 7-pointed star was placed upon the ward table. It sat there, heavy with the authority of the faith. Jasaerous, his hand steady despite his youth, stepped forward and placed his palm directly upon the leather and the crystal. A hush fell over the council. He swore a solemn oath. He swore on that holy text that he would act as a diplomat. He would not swing a sword in anger. He would not loose an arrow. He would not command Vermax to breathe flame upon an enemy. He was her voice, and only her voice. He was her reaching hand across the realm. The room fell silent as the pact was sealed, binding a prince of the blood to the rigid chains of peaceful duty. It was a promise made under the shadow of pure desperation. Jace could feel the gaze of Daemon on his back, heavy with a warrior's skepticism. He could feel the gaze of his mother, heavy with the fear of every mother who has sent a child into a storm. He understood that he was her heir, her firstborn, her hope. He accepted the oath, but he also knew the truth of the realm. The wolves of the north and the falcons of the Vale would respect him more for the smell of Dragonstone smoke on his coat than for the words from his mouth. As the council adjourned, he did not linger. He walked directly into the cold night air toward the Dragonmont, toward Vermax. The future was as uncertain as the winds over Shipbreaker Bay. He was taking flight into a storm of politics, betrayal, and steel. The next great movement of this war is the story of that flight. It begins with the beat of dragon wings and the desperate hope of a boy who promised to be a diplomat, hurtling toward a destiny that had no intention of honoring that oath. It is the path known as Jasaerous, the Diplomat, taking flight, a journey through the most dangerous skies in the history of the realm, where the line between envoy and warrior would blur into the cold mist of the sea. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. From the war councils of Dragonstone, where the fate of the realm was debated in hushed voices and bold proclamations, Jacaerys Velaryon emerged not as a child to be protected, but as a weapon to be deployed. The Black Council had convened, and its members looked to Rhaenyra for direction. It was Jace who stepped forward, offering himself not as a symbol, but as a solution. The council understood the dire arithmetic of the war. They needed swords. They needed the north. And so the strategic decision to send Jace north to secure the great houses was made. A gamble on the blood of a dragon and the heart of a boy. It is easy to read these events in the cold script of history and see a boy prince flying from castle to castle, delivering letters and exchanging pleasantries. But if you pause to consider the weight of the realm's future resting on the shoulders of a 15-year-old, the reality becomes something far more staggering. Jace was not merely an errand boy. He was the living embodiment of the Black cause in the flesh. Every lord he met would judge his mother through him. The tilt of his head, the firmness of his handshake, the steadiness of his gaze. 15 years old, that is not a man and not quite a child. It is an age caught in the terrible gap between innocence and the full horror of responsibility. One misstep, one poorly chosen word, and the northern armies might stay put in their frozen keeps. The Knights of the Vale might never take flight. It was a burden that would have crushed most seasoned lords, let alone a boy thrust into the bloodiest war the realm had ever seen. The morning of his departure was gray and solemn. Dragonstone, a fortress carved from volcanic fury and steeped in Targaryen legacy, felt more like a cage than a castle in that moment. Jace walked the familiar stone paths, his hand trailing against the rough-hewn walls. A last meal with his mother had been quiet, filled with unsaid words. Rhaenyra placed a hand on his cheek, searching his face for the child she had raised, finding only the prince who was already leaving. He did not look back as he reached the dragon yard. Vermax was waiting, a shimmer of brilliant emerald green and bronze in the pale light, growing stronger and fiercer with every passing day. The departure from Dragonstone on Vermax marked the start of his legendary journey, a flight that would take him far beyond the sound of his mother's voice, beyond the safety of the Blackwater fleet. As the dragon beat its great wings and lifted into the cold air, the sound was a thunderous heartbeat, tearing through the quiet morning. The keep shrank, the waves of the narrow sea became white ribbons far below, and the vastness of the world opened before him. There was no turning back. As the coast of the Crownlands faded into a hazy line behind him, Jace had time to think. He thought of his brother Lucerys, flying east into the teeth of a gathering storm, bound for Storm's End. He thought of Daemon, his stepfather, who had his own bloody tasks to attend to in the Riverlands. But mostly, he thought of the words he would need. The North was a place of hard winters and harder men, a land that kept its own counsel. They did not care for Southern politics or the scheming of the Hightowers. They cared for honor and for oaths. The Starks had sworn a vow to the Iron Throne, but that throne was now held by a usurper. Jace had to convince them that the bond was still sacred, that the blood of the dragon was kin to the blood of the first men. The wind howled past his ears, biting and cold, and he leaned closer to Vermax's warm neck. The world was gray ocean and gray sky, and somewhere ahead, the snowy shores of the north awaited. He did not know then that the path ahead would lead him to a secret pact whispered in the heart of winter, an alliance that would tilt the scales of the entire war, sealed with words and fire. But he knew this much. He was no longer the boy who played at court in King's Landing. He was the Prince of Dragonstone, the firstborn heir, and the North was only the beginning. The foothold in the frozen lands secured, his path would soon bend towards a different kind of challenge. The mountains of the Vale of Arryn rise steep and unforgiving, and the lady who rules there is a harsh mistress whose allegiance was far from guaranteed. We will continue his journey in the next chapter, the Eyrie, securing the Vale. For now, his shadow passes over the ink-black waters of the Bight, and the real dance of the dragons has truly begun. Jace had never seen anything quite like the Eyrie. As Vermax carried him through the mountain passes, the great fortress of House Arryn seemed to grow from the stone itself, impossibly high, a spear of white granite thrusting toward the sky. The journey from Dragonstone had been long, and the wind here was thin and cold, biting at his cheeks even through his riding leathers. But he could not afford to rest, not when the fate of his mother's claim hung on every word he would speak in the coming days. The Vale of Arryn had always been a cautious kingdom. Its lords remembered the horrors of the past, the wars that had consumed their ancestors, and they had learned to wait, to watch, to choose their moment with care. Lady Jane Arryn, the Maiden of the Vale, had ruled for decades, and she had seen enough treachery from King's Landing to trust no one who came bearing crowns or promises. When Jace's messenger had arrived ahead of him, she had not sent word of welcome or rejection. She had simply waited, as the Vale always did, for the dragon to appear at her gates. And now he was here, standing in the great hall of the Eyrie, with its 7 slender windows, looking out over the mountains and the sky. The stone floor was cold beneath his boots, and the torches cast long shadows that danced across the walls. Lady Jane sat at the far end of the hall, surrounded by her knights and her household, her face unreadable. She was not young, but she was not old either, a woman in her prime who had learned to rule through patience and steel. Jace had heard the stories, how she had held the Vale together after the death of her cousin, how she had refused to bend to the Greens, even when they sent their envoys with gold and promises. She was a woman who valued loyalty above all else, and that was exactly what Jace had come to offer. He began not with threats, but with kinship. He spoke of his grandmother, Princess Rhaenys, who had been born a Targaryen, but who carried the blood of the Arryns through her own mother. He spoke of the ties that bound their houses together, of the oaths that had been sworn in the days of Aegon the Conqueror, when the dragons had first come to Westeros and the mountain and the Vale had bent the knee. He reminded Lady Jane that her own ancestors had risen with the Targaryensons, had fought beside them in the wars that forged the realm, and that the blood of the dragon and the falcon had run together for generations. But he did not stop there. He knew that words alone would not be enough, not in a world where the Greens had already begun to spread their poison. So he spoke of Vermax, of the dragon that had grown strong and fierce, of the power that the Blacks still held. He did not boast, and he did not threaten. He simply stated the truth, that the dragons of Rhaenyra were many, and that they were loyal, and that the Vale would be safer with them as friends than with the Hightowers, who had never loved the mountains or the people who called them home. Lady Jane listened, and she watched. She saw the young prince before her, barely 15, but carrying himself with the weight of a man who had already seen too much. She saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had burned in Rhaenyra when she was young, and she saw the wisdom in his words. The Vale had no dragons of its own, and it had no fleet that could match the Velaryons. It had only its mountains and its pride, and that pride would not let it bow to a usurper, and so she agreed. She pledged the swords of the Vale to Rhaenyra, not because she was afraid, but because she believed. Because Jace had shown her that the Blacks were not just a faction, but a family, and that family had come to her with respect, not demands. It was the first major victory of the war, won not through fire or blood, but through words spoken in a cold hall high above the world. As Jace left the Eyrie, with the wind whipping at his cloak and the sun setting behind the peaks, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had done what his mother had asked of him, and he had done it well. But there was no time to rest, no time to savor the victory. The north was still waiting, and the cold winds were rising. The Vale had been secured, a vital piece of the board, falling into place with the promise of kinship and the shadow of wings. But Jace knew that alliances in the mountains were won with words. In the north, they would be won with respect, or not at all. Leaving the warm halls of the Eyrie, he mounted Vermax and pointed the young dragon's snout toward a horizon that grew steadily grayer, steadily colder. The long, grueling flight of Vermax toward the Wall and Winterfell was a trial unlike any Jace had faced. The dragon was strong, his muscles rippling beneath leathery scales as he climbed higher, seeking the clearest air. But distance in the north is not measured in miles alone. It is measured in the quiet, in the creeping silence that replaces the chirping of southern birds, in the way the rivers slow, and the trees begin to huddle closer together. Hour after hour, the landscape changed beneath them, the vibrant greens of the riverlands bleeding into the deep, somber blues and grays of the pine forests. The wind no longer carried the scent of summer flowers or the salt of Blackwater Bay. It carried the smell of damp earth, of distant snow, of a land holding its breath against the coming winter. Jace's internal reflections on the burden of leadership and the fear of failure grew sharper with every league they flew. The exhilaration of the flight, the thrill of Dragonback that he had known since childhood, faded into a steady, weary rhythm. He was young. The weight he carried was not the easy burden of a prince born to wait for a throne. It was the frantic, crushing weight of a prince who must the throne for his mother before the realm consumed them both. What if he had missed something? What if Lady Erin's loyalty was a mask? What if the Starks, the notoriously stubborn and ancient lords of winter, saw him not as a dragon prince, but as a boy riding a lizard, carrying the fragile claim of a woman they had never met? The thought was a cold stone in his stomach. Failure meant the end of his line. Failure meant the execution of his brothers. Failure meant the death of his mother, a death he could feel waiting for them in the shadows of King's Landing. He gripped the reins tighter, feeling the warmth of Vermax beneath him, the living heartbeat of his power. He could not afford to fail. The atmospheric shift as the prince entered the territory of the Starks was immediate and profound. It was not a border crossed by gate or river, but a line drawn by the very land itself. The neck is a threshold, a swampy, mist-choked barrier that feels older than any castle. As Vermax soared over the bogs of the Crannogman, Jace felt the air change. It became thin, clear, and sharp. Below him, the ground hardened. The tangled, grasping trees of the south gave way to the straight, sentinel pines of the north. The sky, once a soft blue, was now a pale and endless white, as if the color had bled out of the world. He urged Vermax lower, feeling the cold bite at his cheeks, filling his lungs with a crispness that smelled of stone and frost. It was a territory that demanded truth. There was no room for the silken lies of court here. As the rugged coastline of the north passed beneath them, the horizon began to take shape, smoke rising from hidden villages, the ancient road winding through the hills. And then, far in the distance, the sprawling, dark mass of Winterfell steaming in the cold air. It did not glitter like the Eyrie. It was a fortress carved from the bones of the earth, squat, powerful, and defiant. The hot springs that warmed its walls created a faint mist that clung to the towers, making it seem as if the castle was breathing. Jace could feel the eyes of the north upon him. He could feel the weight of 10,000 years of history, watching from beneath the gray skies. Vermax roared, a sound that echoed against the ancient stones, a warning, a greeting, and a claim. As the dragon descended toward the courtyard, Jace knew he was no longer just a prince. He was the embodiment of fire descending into a world of ice. The fate of the dynasty now rested, not on a dragon's wings, but on the words he would speak in the hall of the kings of winter. The dance of the dragons had come to the one place that had never truly known the dragon's heat, and the pact of ice and fire was about to be written in the breath of the north wind. The long flight across the north tested not just the stamina of the dragon Vermax, but the very spirit of the young prince upon his back. Jacaerys Velaryon had seen the wall from a distance, a ribbon of white stretching across the entire horizon, a monument to threats that the South had long forgotten. But his true destination lay to the south of that ancient barrier, nestled within a forest of sentinel trees and ancient pines. The castle of Winterfell was not built for beauty, but for pure, unyielding endurance. Its gray granite walls rose from the frozen earth like the roots of a mountain, and steam curled from the hot springs that warmed its inner courtyards in defiance of the bitter cold. As Vermax descended through the gray clouds, the banners of the dire wolf snapping violently in the wind, Jace knew that the entire future of his mother's cause rested entirely on the man who ruled this unforgiving land. The Lord of Winterfell met him not in a throne room, but in the open courtyard of the first keep, surrounded by the silent stares of his northern bannermen. Cregan Stark was a young man himself, barely older than Jasaerous, yet he carried the weight of 1,000 years of northern tradition in his very posture. His face was long and solemn, his beard thick, and his gray eyes held a wary wisdom that came from someone who had seen the brutal truth of the world without the comfort of southern illusions. To Jasaerous, who had been raised on the stories of dragon lords and the glory of old Valyria. Cregan Stark represented something utterly foreign, a power rooted not in fire and blood, but in ice and stone. The prince dismounted from Vermax, the young dragon sniffing the cold air with evident unease, and the two young leaders stood facing one another for a long, silent moment. It was Cregan who knelt first, a gesture that spoke not of submission, but of profound respect for the heir to the Iron Throne, a respect that went beyond politics and touched upon the sacred oaths of fealty. The real negotiations did not take place in the Great Hall, surrounded by the noise of courtiers and the warmth of braziers. Instead, Cregan Stark took Jasaerous to the Godswood, a sacred grove where the great winter roses still bloomed in defiance of the northern cold. They knelt before the heart tree, a massive weirwood with a face carved deep into its pale white bark, its red sap weeping like tears down the twisted trunk. In the quiet beneath those branches, stripped of all the ceremony of the South, the formalities of rank dissolved entirely. The prince and the lord spoke as men, sharing a haunch of venison and a horn of mead as the night deepened around them. Jace spoke of his mission, his mother's stolen crown, and the fragile promises of the southern lords. Cregan listened, offering counsel that was cold and hard, yet invaluable. He spoke of the threats the Night's Watch faced, the gaps in the wall, and the promise his own father had made to King Viserys. In those quiet hours, a deep and genuine trust was forged between them, not sealed with ink on parchment, but with a shared sense of duty that transcended the petty ambitions of King's Landing. When the terms of the alliance were finally spoken aloud, it became clear that Cregan Stark was playing a much longer game than anyone in the South could comprehend. He did not ask for gold, nor for titles, nor for the plunder of defeated enemies. What he asked for was the future itself. The Pact of Ice and Fire was simple in its ambition, yet staggering in its scope. In exchange for the swords of the North, for the entire host of Winterfell marching south to place Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne, the Iron Throne must promise a Targaryen princess to House Stark, a firstborn daughter of King Jasaerys, or of a future Targaryen monarch, would be betrothed to the heir of Winterfell. This was not a temporary alliance of convenience. It was a binding of two bloodlines for generations to come, the official union of the cold and the hot, the old and the new. Jasaerous, understanding the incredible weight of this promise, the very union of ice and fire that the Maesters would write about for centuries, pledged his word before the old gods. Cregan Stark accepted this oath without hesitation, and in that moment, the North prepared for war. Yet, the story of Jacaerys Velaryon in the North carries a much deeper and more personal mystery than any political accord. The chronicles of the Maesters speak only of the Pact and the formal alliance, but the testimony of a certain fool named Mushroom tells a far more intimate tale. He claims that during his time at Winterfell, Jacaerys found not just a political ally in Cregan Stark, but a companion of another sort entirely. That the snows of the Northie melted something within the prince's guarded heart, leading him to a secret union sealed in the shadow of the ancient walls. This is the story that is whispered in the fires of the winter camps and debated endlessly by historians. In our next chapter, we will venture into that shadow, into the warm chambers of Winterfell during that bitter cold winter, to uncover the truth of the relationship that may have changed everything. The mystery of Sara Snow awaits. The bond between Jacaerys Velaryon and Cregan Stark was forged not just in the cold stone of Winterfell's great hall, but in the firelight of shared purpose. They were two young leaders, each bearing the weight of their houses, their oaths, and the coming storm. That night, they drank together, talked of the ancient ties between dragon and wolf, and sealed the pact of ice and fire with a handshake that echoed through the snowy courtyards. But what else happened in those long, dark northern hours? The histories are silent in some places, and in others, they whisper a secret so controversial that it threatens to rewrite everything we thought we knew about the dutiful prince. According to some accounts, Jace did not leave Winterfell simply with an alliance. He left with a bride. The name is spoken rarely, but when it is, it sends ripples through the archives. Sara Snow. She was Cregan Stark's sister, a woman of the North, born into the old blood of the Starks. A secret marriage, performed in the Godswood before a weirwood tree, witnessed only by the heart tree's carved face and the falling snow. The chronicles of maesters loyal to the Greens dismiss this as a fanciful tale, a rumor spread to undermine Jace's standing. But the northern oral tradition holds it as truth, passed down through generations of Winterfell servants and storytellers. Now, think of Jace in that moment. He was the heir to the Iron Throne, his mother's most trusted confidant, a prince who had been raised to put duty above all else. Yet here, in the farthest reaches of the realm, he found something unexpected. Perhaps it was the stark beauty of the North, or the fierce intelligence he saw in Sara's gray eyes. Or perhaps it was simply the desperate need for a human connection in the midst of a war that demanded everything from him. The conflict between his duty to his mother and his supposed personal desires would have torn at him. To marry without Rhaenyra's blessing, without the counsel of the Black Council, was an act of profound independence, maybe even defiance. But the Pact of Ice and Fire was not just a political document. It was a blood pact, and binding the Velaryon line to the Starks through marriage would have strengthened it beyond measure. Yet if this marriage truly happened, it complicates the historical narrative of the dutiful prince. The official records, written by maesters who served the winning side after the dance, paint Jace as a paragon of chivalrous obedience, a young man who never strayed from his mother's will. But a secret marriage to Sara Snow suggests a prince who acted on his own judgment, who understood that some alliances are too precious to be left to letters and seals. It suggests a young man capable of love, or at least of a deep, impulsive trust. And it raises the question, what happened to Sara Snow after Jace's death? There are no records of her surviving the war, no mention of a child from their union. Some northern tales say she vanished into the deep woods, mourning her prince in silence. Others claim she died in childbirth, her spirit becoming a wind that howls through the winter nights. The mystery of Sara Snow is a crack in the polished armor of history. It reminds us that even the most dutiful of princes might have held a secret flame, a hidden corner of his heart that belonged not to a throne, but to a woman of the North. And as we consider that possibility, we must also remember that Jace's story is far from over. The next chapter unfolds not in the cold quiet of a marriage chamber, but in the skies above Storm's End, where a younger brother's dragon will meet a fate that shatters the Black Cause forever. The name of that chapter is The Death of Lucerys, a brother's grief. The cold winds of the North had carried many things to Jace during his time at Winterfell. The scent of pine and snow, the weight of the Pact of Ice and Fire he had sealed with Cregan Stark, but no wind could have prepared him for the news that came from the south, from Storm's End, where his brother Lucerys had been sent on a similar mission of diplomacy. It was Cregan Stark who brought the Raven's message to Jace, his face grim as the northern sky. Lucerys had died at Storm's End at the hands of Aemon Targaryen and his dragon Vagar. The words fell like stones into a deep well, each one sinking further into Jace's heart. His brother, the boy he had trained with, laughed with, and sworn to protect, was gone, killed not in battle, but in an act of senseless violence that shattered any hope of peace. In that moment, Jace felt the cold bite of the North more acutely than ever before. The diplomacy that had defined his mission, the careful words and measured alliances, all of it suddenly seemed futile. He had come to the North as an envoy of his mother's cause, seeking to build bridges and secure loyalty through reason and blood ties. But the death of Luke transformed everything. The mission was no longer about diplomacy, it was about vengeance. The war, Jace realized, would not be won with treaties or promises. It would be fought with blood and fire. He looked at Vermax, his dragon, who seemed to sense the shift in his rider's heart. The dragon's eyes glowed with a fire that matched Jace's own resolve. The hardening of his heart was as a necessary cruelty, a protective shell against the grief that threatened to consume him. He knew that from this point on, every decision he made would be colored by the loss of his brother. The war was no longer a distant conflict. It was personal, intimate, and devastating. Jace's thoughts turned to his mother, Rhaenyra, and how she would receive this news. He imagined her grief, her rage, and the inevitable call to war. His own grief was a heavy burden, but it was also a fuel. He could not bring Luke back, but he could ensure that his death was not in vain. The Blacks would answer for this, and Jace would be at the forefront of that response. With the Pact of Ice and Fire secured, Jace knew he had to return to Dragonstone. The North was now an ally, but the war needed leadership. He had to be by his mother's side to help guide the Black cause through the coming darkness. The journey back would be long, but every mile would bring him closer to the confrontation he now craved. As Vermax lifted into the air, Jace left Winterfell behind, but he also left behind a part of himself. The boy who believed in diplomacy, in the power of words. He was returning to Dragonstone as a man hardened by loss, ready to embrace the fire and blood that the war demanded. The flight south carried him through clouds that seemed to weep for his brother, the winds mourning the loss of a prince who had never tasted battle. But Jace's tears had dried, replaced by a cold determination. He knew that his return to Dragonstone would be the beginning of a new, unforgiving phase in the war, one that would reveal just how far he was willing to go to avenge the brother he had lost. The news of Lucerys Velaryon's death at Storm's End did not travel by raven, nor by messenger, nor by any of the slow, uncertain methods that men of the court might use. It traveled on dragon's wings. The beast that bore the tidings was Vhagar, the oldest and largest dragon in the known world, and she carried upon her back the man who had delivered the killing blow. But the news itself, the full and terrible weight of what had happened, did not reach Dragonstone until the dawn after the storm, when a lone raven, bloodied and exhausted, finally collapsed into the rookery. Jace had been in the northern courtyard, reviewing the latest maps of the narrow sea with his mother's master of ships. The air was cold, even for Dragonstone, and the sea below the fortress churned with a restless, gray energy. He had been away for weeks, first to the Eyrie, then to the frozen heart of the north, and now, finally, he was home. But home did not feel like safety. It felt like a waiting room for a war he had not yet been allowed to fight. When the maester's voice called out his name, urgent and strained, Jace felt the cold grip of the island's stone walls tighten around him before he even heard the words. He found Rhaenyra in the chamber of the painted table. She was not seated. She was standing, her hands pressed flat against the carved surface of the great map of Westeros, as if she could feel the shape of the land through the wood. Her back was to him, and for a long moment, Jace said nothing. He knew the posture. It was the same stance his mother had taken when her father, King Viserys, had died. It was the stance of a woman who was holding the world together with her own will, and who feared that if she turned, the world would shatter. Jace's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. He said her name, Rhaenyra. Not my queen, not my mother, but Rhaenyra, the name of the woman who had once been a girl, who had once flown with him on Vermax, over the shores of Driftmark, who had once laughed. That girl was gone. When Rhaenyra turned, Jace saw her face, and he understood that the war had already taken something from her that could never be returned. Her eyes were red, but not from tears. They were the red of a fire that had burned through everything soft and had now turned to ash. She spoke, and her voice was flat, hollow, like the sound of a stone dropped into a deep well. She said, "Luke is dead. Aemond killed him at Storm's End. He sent his dragon after my son, and my son is dead." Jace felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He had known, of course. The raven had carried the news, but the raven had only carried the bare facts. The death of a prince, the loss of a dragon, the failure of a mission. But Rhaenyra's voice, speaking the words aloud, made them real in a way that no message could. Luke was dead. Luke, who had been younger, who had been gentler, who had been the one Jace had sworn to protect when they were both children. Luke, who had been sent to Storm's End as a messenger of peace, and who had been murdered for his trouble. Jace did not weep. He could not. The grief was there, a heavy, cold stone in his chest, but it was buried beneath something else, something harder, something that felt like the edge of a blade. He looked at his mother, and he saw the same thing in her. Grief, yes, but more than grief. Rhaenyra was not a woman who had lost a son. She was a queen who had lost a weapon. She was a mother who had lost a piece of her own heart. And she was a dragon who had been wounded and who now wanted nothing more than to burn. The reunion between Jace and Rhaenyra was not a scene of tears and embraces. It was a scene of cold, hard strategy. Rhaenyra took Jace by the arm, her grip strong, and she led him to the window that overlooked the sea. She spoke of the Greens, of Aegon the usurper, of the Hightowers who had stolen her throne. She spoke of Aemond, her nephew, the one-eyed prince who had killed her son. And then she spoke of vengeance. Jace listened. He had always been a good listener, a trait that had served him well in the Eyrie and in the north. But now, listening felt like a betrayal. He wanted to act. He wanted to mount Vermax and fly to King's Landing, to find Aemond Targaryen and make him pay for what he had done. But Rhaenyra's hand on his arm was a restraint, and her voice, though filled with fire, was also filled with a terrible, calculating patience. She told him that the time for mourning was over. The time for action had begun. But action in the world of queens and kings was not the same as revenge. Action meant strategy. Action meant alliances. Action meant the slow, grinding work of building a war machine from the ashes of a broken peace. And then, Rhaenyra did something that Jace had not expected. She stepped back from the window, and she looked at him, not as a mother looks at a son, but as a queen looks at her heir. She said the words that would change everything. She said, "You are no longer just my son, Jace. You are the Prince of Dragonstone. You are my heir. You are the future of the House of Targaryen, and you will carry that weight until the day I die, or until the day you sit the Iron Throne." Jace felt the title settle on him like a crown of iron. It was not a gift. It was a burden. The Prince of Dragonstone, the heir to the throne, the name that the Greens would mock, the name that the lords of the realm would either rally behind or reject. He was no longer a boy on a diplomatic mission. He was the second most powerful person in the Black cause, and every decision he made from this moment forward would be a decision that could cost thousands of lives. The strategic shift was immediate. Jace began to take control of the war effort, not by seizing power, but by stepping into the role that Rhaenyra had always intended for him. He called the Lords of Dragonstone to the chamber of the painted table, and he laid out a plan that was not born of grief, but of cold, hard necessity. The Blacks needed more dragons. The Greens had Vogger, the largest and most fearsome beast in the world. The Blacks had Vermax and Syrax and Caraxes and the younger dragons, but they needed more. They needed riders. Jace spoke of the Dragonseeds, the bastards of Dragonstone, the children of Targaryen blood who had been left to grow up in obscurity. He spoke of claiming the wild dragons, the beasts that had never known a rider. He spoke of a plan that was desperate, dangerous, and perhaps the only hope the Blacks had of winning the war. Rhaenyra listened. She did not argue. She did not object. She simply nodded, and Jace understood that she was giving him the authority to act. She was trusting him with the future of their cause. The night before Jace was to leave for the Dragonmont, the great volcanic mountain that housed the wild dragons, he stood alone on the cliffs of Dragonstone. The sea below was black, the sky above was black, and the only light was the faint, distant glow of the fires that burned in the camps of the Black Army. He thought of Luke. He thought of the way his brother had laughed, the way he had flown, the way he had been too brave for his own good. And he thought of the promise he had made to himself. Standing in the cold, dark air of Dragonstone, he would not let Luke's death be meaningless. He would not let the war end in defeat. He would not let the Greens win. The weight of the crown, the weight of the title, the weight of the grief, all of it pressed down on him. But Jace did not break. He was the Prince of Dragonstone. He was the heir, and he would do what needed to be done. The next chapter, the Sowing of the Sea Seeds, will take us into the heart of that desperate plan. It will explore the Dragonseeds, the bastards of Targaryen blood, and the wild beasts that had never known a rider. It will ask the question that haunted Jace's every waking moment. Can a war be won with dragons that have never been tamed? The cold of Dragonstone clung to Jacaerys Velaryon long after he dismounted from Vermax. His return was not a triumphant homecoming, but a grim retreat into the shelter of the stone drum. He was the Prince of Dragonstone now, the heir to a throne his mother sat upon in name only, her power barely extending beyond the shores of this volcanic island. The weight of his brother Lucerys' death settled on him, not as grief alone, but as a cold, furious pressure. He saw the mourning in the halls, heard Queen Rhaenyra's commands, and knew that words and ravens would not be enough to secure their claim. The Blacks needed dragons in the sky. They needed riders that no one else had thought to look for. The enemy held Vogger, the largest and most terrible dragon alive. Aemond Targaryen had proven that one dragon alone could turn a battle, and yet Dragonstone was home to a wealth of fire that no other fortress in Westeros could match. Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, once ridden by King Jaehaerys the Conciliator, slumbered in the Dragonmont. Silverwing, the gentle queen of good Queen Alizanne, roamed the peaks. There was Sheep's Stealer, a cunning wild dragon who haunted the hills. Grey Ghost, a shy creature who only appeared at sea. And the Black Terror known as the Cannibal, a beast so old and malevolent that he feasted on his own kind. These were weapons of immense power, untouchable and proud. Daemon Targaryen might have been able to tame them, but Daemon was occupied with the war in the Riverlands. Rhaenyra rode Syrax, but she could not be everywhere. The realm was bleeding, and the greatest weapons in the world were sleeping under their feet. So Jace looked upon the dragonless riders of their house, and he looked upon the people of Dragonstone and Driftmark. He saw the faces of women, of small folk, of boys his own age, working the forges and the fisheries. In their veins, some of them might have run the blood of Dragonstone, the blood of old Valyria. And in that realization, Jacaerys forged a radical plan to find new riders for the riderless dragons on Dragonstone. It was a desperate gamble, born of grief and of genius. He would search for the Dragonseeds, the bastards of House Targaryen, scattered among the common folk for generations, were his only hope to bridge the gap against the Greens. The proposal, when Jace brought it before his mother's council, was met with a sharp and chilling silence. The lords of the realm understood well the political risks of empowering dragonseeds of low birth. Bestowing the power of a dragon upon a blacksmith's son or a fisherman's daughter was a fundamental shattering of the feudal compact. What was the value of a lord's oath and a lord's army when a bastard could simply take to the sky and burn them all? Lord Corlys Velaryon, ever the pragmatist who valued blood and fire over titles, saw the military necessity. But the other high lords, the Mootons and the Stokeworths, bristled. They saw their own loyal service, their centuries of lineage, being rendered obsolete by the blood of a low-born whore. Rhaenyra herself hesitated. It was a power that could not be controlled, a power that, once given, could never be taken back. This debate exposed the deepest tension there was. The tension between the highborn lords and the bastards who would become dragon riders. The court became a nest of vipers muttering in the shadowy corners of the great hall. Lord Staunton whispered that it was an insult to every knight who had bled for the crown. Sir Laurent Marbrand argued that the loyalty of a highborn man was worth more than the flame of a common girl. But Jace countered with a logic that cut through their pride. He asked them point blank if any of them could mount Vermithor. Silence. The dragons did not care for titles. They cared for blood and for fire. And the Greens were not going to ask a dragon its opinion on proper lineage before it burned the entire black cause to ash. Jace stood his ground. He knew the risks intimately. A dragon seed who tamed a dragon might not remain loyal. They might share Queen Rhaenyra's blood, but they did not share her name, her duty, or her promise. They were wild cards, scattered seeds that could grow into thorns. Yet the risks of not claiming those dragons was far greater. If the Greens ever found a way to claim them, the war would be over before it truly began. And so Jace forced the issue. The proclamation was drafted. Messengers were sent across the island to Driftmark and the villages of the Narrow Sea. Any man or woman of Targaryen bastard blood who could claim a dragon would be richly rewarded. Land, gold, and the honor of serving the queen. It was the promise of fire, and it would draw every desperate soul with a drop of dragon blood out of the shadows. The courtyards of Dragonstone began to fill with a strange and unruly crowd. Fishermen and whores, stewards and smiths, miners and maids. All of them clutched at the faint hope of Targaryen lineage. All of them stared at the great dragon Vermithor, slumbering in the open air, steam rising from his nostrils with every breath. Jace watched from the battlements, his heart heavy with uncertainty. He had set the board, but he could not control the pieces. He did not know which of these desperate souls would ascend to the sky, and which would be devoured in a breath of fire. He did not know if he had just saved his mother's war, or damned it utterly. He was sowing seeds in a storm, knowing full well that the harvest might choke them all. And as the first brave soul stepped forward to face the bronze fury in the shadow of the volcano, the true chaos of the war began. This was the end of any pretense of order. This was the rise of the Dragonseeds. The plan Jacaerys Velaryon had proposed to the Black Council was as audacious as it was dangerous. To send out the call across the narrow sea to the bastards and the forgotten, the sons and daughters of Dragonstone and Driftmark, and offer them a chance to claim the most powerful weapons in the world, the riderless dragons of the Targaryen dynasty. It was a gamble born of desperation, but it was a gamble that was about to pay off, changing the course of the war. And yet, for Jace, the prince who had conceived this strategy, the victory would come with a heavy price. The proclamation echoed through the villages of Dragonstone and the nearby shores of Crackclaw Point. Any man or woman of Targaryen blood, no matter how base their birth, could come to the Dragonmont and attempt to claim a dragon. The seeds of the dragon, the bastards of House Targaryen, were summoned. Among the first to answer were a pair of brothers, Adam and Alan of Hull. Their mother, a shipwright's daughter, had long hidden a secret. They were the sons of Laenor Velaryon, or so the rumors whispered, making them Rhaenyra's nephews by law, if not by blood. Adam of Hull walked into the lair of Seasmoke, the pale gray dragon who had once been Laenor's mount, and he did not burn. The bond was forged, and the first dragon seed had risen. The true test came with the wild dragons, and the great dragons of the previous generation. Vermithor, the bronze fury, the mount of King Jacaerys I, was a beast of immense size and terrible temper. The air around the Dragonmont grew thick with smoke and the sound of his roar. A dragon seed named Hugh Hammer approached. Hugh was a blacksmith's bastard, a man of brute strength and simple ambition. The bronze fury, ancient and powerful, accepted him. The ground shook. Then came Silverwing, the gentle Silver Queen, once ridden by good Queen Alizanne. She was claimed by a man named Ulf, a drunkard of low cunning, a man who had the blood of the dragon in his veins, but little else to recommend him. The Silver Queen bowed her head to him. In the span of a single day, 3 new dragon riders had been born to the Blacks. The balance of power on Dragonstone shifted dramatically. Jasaerous watched this succession of wonders with a mixture of relief and deep unease. He had conceived this plan out of necessity, but he was the first to understand the danger it posed. These men were not born to lordship. They had not been raised on the histories of their house, on the oaths of duty and sacrifice that bound a dragon rider to their queen. Hugh Hammer was arrogant, his head already turned by the power of the bronze fury. Ulf the White was a liability, a man who drank too much and spoke even more loosely. Jace knew that loyalty purchased by dragonfire was a fragile thing. He tried to manage them, to counsel them, to make them see the gravity of their vows. He knighted them, honored them, gave them gifts and promises of land, but he never trusted them. He could not. He saw in their eyes the same ambition that he saw in the eyes of every lord who hoped to profit from the war. For a brief, shining moment, the strategy worked perfectly. The Blacks now had a dragon advantage that was almost insurmountable. With Vermithor, Silverwing, and Seasmoke added to their ranks, alongside Syrax, Caraxes, Melis, and the smaller dragons of his brothers, Rhaenyra's cause seemed destined for victory. The mood on Dragonstone lightened. Hope returned to the Black Council. They could now threaten King's Landing, not just from the sea, but from the sky. It was a temporary shift in the balance of power in favor of the Blacks, but it was a real one. For the first time since the beginning of the war, the path to the Iron Throne seemed clear. Yet, Jace knew that times of triumph were often the most dangerous. The seeds of the dragon had been sown, but the harvest would be reaped by others. The king who has been too long absent, the young prince thought, must return home. But the home that Jace was tasked with protecting was threatened by a new shadow from the east. The Triarchy, the pirate lords of the Stepstones, funded by the Greens, had begun to assemble a massive fleet in the harbor of King's Landing. They aimed to break the Velaryon blockade. They aimed to starve Dragonstone into submission. Jace knew he could not leave this threat unanswered. He had fought to grow his power, to gather his dragons, but the war was still a story written on the open water. His part in it was far from over. The Triarchy Awakens. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The successful claiming of Vermithor, Silverwing, and Seasmoke sent a clear signal across the realm. The Blacks had new dragon riders, men and women of low birth, who now commanded beasts that could turn the tide of war. But this victory came at a cost. The new riders were wild cards, their loyalty uncertain, their tempers frayed after the harrowing experience of bonding with such ancient and powerful creatures. Jace watched them from the walls of Dragonstone, his mind already racing with the next threat. The dragons gave his mother a weapon, but the enemy was far from idle. And on the other side of the narrow sea, in the sun-baked cities of Essos, a desperate plan was taking shape. The Greens needed a way to break the Velaryon blockade, the iron grip that Corlys Velaryon's fleet had placed on the Gullet, the narrow strait between Dragonstone and Driftmark. Without it, King's Landing starved, trade withered. Aegon II's claim grew weaker with each passing moon, so they turned to the Triarchy. The Triarchy was not a single nation, but a loose alliance of 3 free cities, Myr, Tyrish, and Lys. They were known for their fleets, their sellswords, and their ruthlessness. For decades, they had fought the growing power of Volantis and the Ironborn. But now they saw a chance to plunder the spoils of a fractured Westeros. The Greens offered gold, land, and the promise of future trade rights. The Triarchy accepted, and soon the shipbuilders of Myr and Tyrosh began working day and night. You might wonder what kind of vessels these were. The Myrish and Tyroshi fleets were not gentle cogs or lumbering carracks. They built swift, low-lying galleys with sharp rams and decks crowded with crossbowmen. There were also war galleys with iron-tipped prows and swift cogs designed to carry hundreds of soldiers. The Triarchy had learned to fight in the disputed lands, and they brought that savagery to the narrow sea. Their admiral, a man known simply as the Shadow, had a reputation for never taking prisoners. These ships gathered in secret harbors along the coast of Essos, then sailed in small groups to avoid detection. The final rendezvous was in a wide bay just east of the Gullet, where dozens of vessels massed like clouds before a storm. The sound of oars, the creak of rope, the shouted commands in foreign tongues, all of it built to a crescendo. The Greens placed their hope in this fleet, and perhaps they were right to. But there was a problem. The Blacks had eyes and ears across the narrow sea, spies in Pentos, in Myr, and Tyrosh itself. Messages passed from merchant sailors to dock workers to silent informants who whispered to Lord Corlys Velaryon. And so word came to Dragonstone. A great fleet was assembling. The Triarchy was coming. Jace received these reports in the weeks after the Dragonseeds were sworn. He read them in the same chamber where his mother sat with her council, the painted table stretching before them. The intelligence was clear. Hundreds of ships, thousands of men, an invasion aimed at the Gullet. yet Jace dismissed some of the warnings. He believed the Dragonseeds gave the Blacks such overwhelming power that no fleet could stand against them. He was young, and he was eager for glory, and he underestimated the cunning of the enemy. Perhaps he also underestimated his own exhaustion. The grief for Lucerys still festered. The weight of his new title as Prince of Dragonstone pressed on his shoulders, and he had been traveling, negotiating, fighting, always pushing forward without rest. The reports of the Triarchy were just another obstacle, and he assumed they would be crushed by Vermax's flames and the Velaryon navy. He did not ask for more details. He did not question the speed of the gathering, and so the fleet grew. Day by day, the Mirish and Tiroshi ships slipped through the mists of the narrow sea, assembling like wolves in the dark. The commander of the Triarchy, a Lycan corsair named Shirako Lohar, knew the currents and the tides. He had been paid in gold from the Lannisters and promises from the Hightowers. His orders were clear: sail into the Gullet, break the blockade, and if possible, capture or kill any dragon they could. But dragons breathe fire from the sky. How could a fleet of wooden ships hope to survive? The Triarchy had their answer. They had studied the dance of the dragons for years. They knew that one dragon could be brought down by 100 arrows if the archers were patient and the dragon came low enough. And they had crossbowmen from Myr who could hit a coin at 50 paces. They had harpoons from Tyrish, long iron shafts designed to be thrown into a dragon's wings. And they had the resolve of men who had fought in 100 battles. The intelligence reports that Jace ignored or underestimated in his haste for victory would prove fatal. There were scribes in Driftmark who had copied the warnings from Essosi merchants. The ships were not merely transports. They were armed with scorpions and mangonels designed to launch projectiles high into the air. There were whispers that the Triarchy knew the precise route the Black Fleet would take. But Jace, perhaps trusting in his own bravery, did not call for a war council. He did not stop to consider that the enemy might have learned from earlier mistakes. Instead, he prepared for a straight fight. He mounted Vermax, that bright green dragon with the scarlet crest, and took to the sky. He could see from above the gaps in the blockade, the open water where the Triarchy would try to slip through. He believed a single dragon could turn the tide, and perhaps it could have if the Triarchy had not been ready. But the fleet was gathering, the Triarchy was awakening, and the narrow sea, which had been a black shield for the Blacks, was about to become a bloody trap. The ships were so many that from a distance they looked like a forest of masts rising from the horizon. Their sails were dyed in the colors of Myr and Tyrish, purple and yellow, with the golden skull of the Triarchy painted on the flagship. The Admiral, Shirako Lohar, stood on the deck, a man with a shaved head and a beard braided with gold rings. He watched the sun set over the shore of Westeros, and he smiled. Jace on Dragonstone did not see that smile. He only saw the next mission, the next battle, the next chance to avenge his brother. He did not slow down long enough to read the full reports tucked away in Corlys's solar. He did not ask why the Triarchy had chosen this moment to strike. He was too young to understand that sometimes the greatest victories come not from speed, but from patience. And the fleet continued to gather, silent as the tide, until the day when the Gullet would fill with fire and blood. That day would come sooner than anyone expected, and when it came, the world would see what happens when a dragon meets 100 crossbows. But for now, there was still a breath of calm. The night before the battle, the Triarchy ships anchored just out of sight of Driftmark's watchtowers. The crews ate their last meals, sharpened their blades, and said their prayers to gods of sea and sky. On Dragonstone, Jace sat alone with Vermax, the dragon's breath warm against his shoulder. He thought of his mother, of Lucerys, of the promise he had made to avenge them all. He did not think of the intelligence he had set aside, and so the stage was set. The next chapter of this war would unfold, not in a castle, not in a field of honor, but in the cold gray waters of the Gullet, where the fate of the realm would hinge on a single choice made too quickly. What happened when the Triarchy finally closed its jaws, and what Jace did not see until it was too late. That story waits for the chapter ahead, when the blockade of the Gullet becomes the graveyard of princes. The Triarchy of Essos had been courted by the Greens as a desperate gambit, a mercenary navy of Mirish and Tiroshi warships hired to shatter the Velaryon blockade that had held the Gullet in an iron grip for nearly a year. That blockade was the silent, unyielding backbone of Rhaenyra's war effort. Without it, King's Landing would have been resupplied by sea. The Iron Throne would have drawn fresh levies from across the narrow sea, and the Black Cause would have been starved into submission by simple maritime suffocation. But the Velaryon fleet, commanded by Lord Corlys himself, had turned the Gullet into a sealed throat. No grain, no timber, no sellswords, no steady stream of gold could reach Aegon the Usurper by water. The harbors of Driftmark and the Spicetown docks hummed with the quiet authority of ships flying the Seahorse banner, and every inbound vessel from Pentos, Bravos, or the Free Cities risked impoundment or a volley of ballista bolts. Jacaerys Velaryon understood this better than anyone. He had spent his youth learning the sea from his grandfather, studying the tides, the wind patterns, the hidden reefs that could rip a hull open. He knew that the Gullet was the strategic heart of the war, a narrow corridor between the mainland and the island of Driftmark, the only deep water route to the Blackwater Bay and the gates of the Red Keep. To control the Gullet was to control the lifeblood of the realm, and for months the Blacks had held it. But that dominance was fragile, and Jace could feel it changing, the way a sailor feels a storm pressing on the horizon before the sky even darkens. Rhaenyra had not set foot on a ship since Lucerys' death. She remained on Dragonstone, cloistered in her chambers, her grief a living thing that consumed her hours and hollowed her voice. She received ravens, she gave orders from her desis, but she could not bear to face the seas that had swallowed her son. So the burden of commanding the naval defenses fell to Jace. At 15 years old, Prince of Dragonstone, heir to the Iron Throne, he became the de facto admiral of the Black Fleet. He flew Vermax along the coastlines at dawn, scanning for smoke on the eastern horizon. He stood on the battlements of Spicetown, watching the warships rotate their patrols in the cold, gray dawn. He conferred with Lord Corlys in the Sea Snake's chart room, where maps covered every wall and the scent of salt and old parchment filled the air. The old lord did not treat him as a boy. He treated him as a commander. There were discussions of supply lines, of timber reserves on the mainland, of the wages due to the oarsmen. There were meetings with the captains of the blockade, men hardened by decades of piracy and war. Jace listened more than he spoke, but when he spoke, his words carried the weight of the crown. He ordered that the outermost picket ships be doubled, that the signal fires on the headlands be kept burning through the night, that every fishing vessel entering the bay be searched for contraband, and all the while, the reports from the east whispered of the Triarchy's advance. Their fleet had left the Stepstones. They were massing at Bloodstone. They were moving west, but the sea remained calm. A strange, heavy stillness settled over the Gullet in the days that followed. The winds dropped. the current slowed. The sun set in a bruise of purple and orange, and the night stretched long and dark. Jace walked the ramparts of Dragonstone alone after midnight, the smoldering air hot against his face, the distant sound of waves lapping against the volcanic rock, the only music. It was the calm before the storm, and he knew it. Every sailor knows that stillness. It is the silence that settles before the first clap of thunder, the hush that spreads across the deck when the barometer drops and the gulls vanish inland. Jace felt it in his bones, and it kept him from sleep. He thought of Luke. He thought of the last time they had stood together on this very wall, laughing at some foolish joke, the wind tangling their hair. He thought of the promise he had made to return with stark spears, to avenge his brother, to win this war. And now, standing in the darkness, he felt the weight of that promise pressing on his shoulders. He was not afraid to die. He was afraid to fail. On the 7th night of that unnatural calm, the scout ships returned with their sails furled, their captains pale-faced. The Triarchy fleet had slipped the Eastern Watch. 40 ships, perhaps more. Mirish galleys with long rams, Taroshi carracks with triple banks of oars, and a dozen heavy cogs carrying sellsword companies from the disputed lands. They were coming under cover of darkness, guided by the lights of the coast, moving in a loose formation that stretched across the horizon like a net. They would reach the mouth of the Gullet before dawn. Jace received the news in the stone drum, the fortress's central tower. He did not wake Rhaenyra. He did not send for his mother. He simply nodded, strapped on his sword belt, and walked to the dragon gate where Vermax waited. The young dragon's scales gleamed like polished jade in the torchlight, and his eyes reflected the fire within. Jace mounted him without ceremony, and together they rose into the black sky, the wind tearing at his cloak, the stars blurred by speed. Below him, the Velaryon fleet was stirring. Lanterns flickered across the decks. Captains shouted orders. Oars splashed into the water. And out there, somewhere in the darkness, the Triarchy sailed on. The blockade was about to become a battle. What happened next would be remembered as the Battle of the Gullet. But for Jace, it was not a battle. It was a single, terrible moment when the sea and the sky and the fire all came together, and the dragon prince who had done everything right found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. That moment is coming. The ships are closing. The arrows are being knocked. And Vermax, loyal and fierce, is about to make his last flight. The Gullet had been quiet for days. Too quiet, some of the Velaryon captains whispered to one another as they paced the decks of their warships, scanning the horizon for any sign of sails. Jace had heard those whispers, had seen the unease in the eyes of seasoned sailors who knew that stillness often preceded the worst storms. But Rhaenyra remained in her chambers on Dragonstone, consumed by grief for Lucerys, and the burden of command had fallen fully onto the shoulders of a prince who had only just turned 15. He stood on the battlements of the fortress, watching the sun rise over the narrow sea, and he felt the weight of an entire kingdom pressing down on him. The fleet was positioned well. Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake himself, had spent decades mastering these waters, and his captains had drilled the blockade into a precise machine. Ships stretched across the Gullet in a staggered formation, their hulls bristling with archers and their decks lined with ballistae. Jace had reviewed the defensive plans with Lord Corlys more than once, committing every detail to memory. He knew the wind patterns, the tidal shifts, the hidden shoals that could tear the bottom out of an unwary galley. He knew that the Greens had allied with the Triarchy, a coalition of free cities from across the narrow sea. Myr, Tirush, Lys, and he knew that their combined fleet outnumbered the Velaryon forces by a significant margin. What he did not know was when they would come. And then, on a morning that began like any other, the horizon changed. It started as a thin line of darkness, where the sea met the sky, barely visible against the haze. But that line grew thicker, darker, until it resolved into the masts of 100 ships, then 200, then more than the lookouts could count. The Triarchy had come, and they had come in force. Drums beat across the Velaryon fleet as horns sounded the alarm. Sailors scrambled to their posts. Archers knocked arrows, and captains shouted orders that were swallowed by the rising wind. Jace saw the fleet begin to move, saw the first volleys of arrows arc toward the approaching enemy, and he knew that the blockade had just become a battle. He did not hesitate. He called for Vermax. The young dragon had grown restless in the days of waiting, his green scales gleaming like polished jade as he stirred in the dragonmont. Jace had felt the dragon's restlessness through their bond, a low thrum of anticipation that mirrored his own. When he climbed onto Vermax's back, the dragon let out a sharp cry that echoed across the stone walls of Dragonstone. They launched together, Jace leaning low against his mount's neck as the wind tore at his cloak. The fortress fell away beneath them, and the sea opened up below. From the air, the scale of the Triarchy's assault became terrifyingly clear. Their ships were not merely numerous, they were vast. Massive war galleys, each one a floating fortress of oak and iron, moved in coordinated waves. The Mirish vessels were sleek and fast, their hulls painted in swirling patterns of blue and gold. The Tyroshi ships were heavier, broader, their decks crowded with soldiers in gleaming armor. And the Lycene ships were something else entirely. They were beautiful in a way that seemed almost obscene. Their prows, carved into the shapes of maidens and sea serpents, their sails dyed in rich purples and crimsons. But Jace knew that beauty was a mask. These ships carried death. Jace takes to the sky as the Triarchy launches a surprise assault on the fleet. He saw the first collision happen below him, felt the shockwave through the air as a Velaryon ram drove into the side of a Tyroshi galley. Arrows rose in clouds, darkening the air, and men fell into the water where the currents pulled them under. The battle was already becoming chaos, but Jace had one advantage that no enemy could match. He had Vermax. He urged the dragon downward. Fire erupted from Vermax's jaws, a torrent of dragon flame that turned a Mirish war galley into a torch in the space of a single breath. The heat was immense, even from above, and Jace felt it wash over him like the opening of an oven. The wooden deck of the galley caught instantly, the flames hungry and unstoppable. Sailors dove into the sea, their armor dragging them down, and the ship began to list as fire spread to the rigging. Jace pulled up, banked hard, and dove again. Another ship, another torrent of fire. The Associ had never faced dragons in battle before. They had heard the stories, of course. Every child in the Free Cities grew up hearing tales of Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters, of the Field of Fire, of Harrenhal's melting towers. But stories could not prepare a man for the reality of dragonfire. It was not heat as they understood it. It was annihilation given form. The initial success of the dragon riders against the wooden ships of the Associ was staggering. Within minutes, a dozen ships were burning. Within an hour, the Triarchy's vanguard was in chaos. Jace saw other dragons join the fray from the corner of his eye. Sea smoke, with Atom of Hull clinging to its back. Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, ridden by Ulf the White. Silverwing, soaring under Nettles' steady hand. The Dragonseeds were proving their worth beyond any doubt. Together, they turned the sea into a furnace. Ships burned and sank, and the waters of the Gullet grew thick with wreckage and ash. But the Triarchy had not come unprepared. Jace saw it happen first to sea smoke. The grey dragon was diving low over a cluster of Triarchy galleys when something rose from the deck of the lead ship. It was a bolt, massive and barbed, fired from a scorpion mounted on a reinforced turret. The bolt struck sea smoke in the flank, and the dragon roared in pain. Adam struggled to keep his seat as the dragon lurched, but he managed to pull up, the bolt still embedded in his mount's side. Jace's blood went cold. He scanned the enemy fleet more carefully and saw them now. The Triarchy had placed scorpions on nearly every ship, hidden beneath canvas tarps that had been thrown aside the moment the dragons committed to the attack. They had learned. They had adapted. They had built weapons specifically to counter the only advantage the Blacks possessed. Jace called out a warning, but his voice was lost in the wind and the roar of flame. The moment the battle turns as the Triarchy reveals their anti-dragon tactics. Another bolt flew past Jace's head, close enough that he felt the wind of its passage. Vermax twisted in the air, avoiding a second shot by inches. Below, the Velaryon fleet was beginning to falter. The Triarchy's ships pushed forward, using their numbers to overwhelm the blockade. The dragons were still killing, still burning, but they could not be everywhere at once. And every time they dove, they risked encountering those scorpions, those massive crossbows designed to bring down the greatest weapons the Targaryens had ever possessed. Jace made a decision. He would lead the assault himself, target the ships with the heaviest scorpion emplacements, and he would burn them before they could fire again. It was reckless. It was desperate, but it was the only way. He turned Vermax toward the heart of the enemy fleet, toward the largest galley he could see, a Triarchy flagship whose decks were lined with those deadly weapons. He did not know that this would be his last flight. He did not know that the crossbowmen on that ship had been training for years to hit a moving target in the sky, that they had drilled for this very moment. He only knew that the battle was slipping away and that he had to stop it. He dove. Vermax's wings folded against his sides, and the world blurred into wind and spray. The flagship grew in his vision, the scorpions becoming distinct, the men becoming faces. He saw them aiming. He saw them fire. But he was too fast, too low, and the bolts passed above him. Flame erupted from Vermax's jaws, and the deck of the flagship ignited in a wall of fire. Jace pulled up, climbing hard, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, he thought he had done it. He thought he had turned the tide. But the air was thick with bolts now. The Triarchy had learned, and they had prepared, and they had spread their traps across the entire fleet. A bolt struck Vermax in the wing, tearing through the membrane and sending the dragon into a violent spin. Jace clung to the reins, his body slamming against the saddle as the world spun around him. He tried to steady Vermax, tried to find the horizon, but the dragon was wounded and bleeding and falling. Another bolt struck, this one deeper, and Vermax let out a final, terrible cry that seemed to shake the very sky. Jace unbuckled his harness. He had to. The dragon was going down, and if he stayed strapped to the saddle, he would be dragged into the sea and drowned. He pushed himself free, felt the wind tear at him as he fell, and for a moment he was suspended in the air with the battle raging all around him. He saw Vermax crash into the water, saw the dragon's body disappear beneath the waves, and then he hit the surface himself, the impact driving the breath from his lungs, the cold salt water closing over his head. He surfaced, gasping, and tried to orient himself. The ships were all around him, burning and sinking. The sounds of battle echoed across the water. He heard shouting, heard the twang of bowstrings, heard the roar of dragons that were not his own. He began to swim, his arms heavy with exhaustion, his armor pulling him down. He did not see the crossbowmen on the deck of a nearby Myrish galley. He did not see them take aim, but they saw him. The bolts struck him before he could even cry out. 3 of them fired almost simultaneously, and each one found its mark. Jace felt the impact, felt the pain that was already becoming numbness, and he felt the water close over him for the last time. The Prince of Dragonstone, the heir to the Iron Throne, the son of Rhaenyra Targaryen, died in the cold and dark of the Gullet, his blood mingling with the sea that had swallowed his dragon. The battle was not yet over. The Triarchy pressed their advantage, and the Velaryon fleet suffered terrible losses. But the death of Jacaerys Velaryon was a wound that would never heal. It broke something in Rhaenyra, something that had already been cracked by the loss of Lucerys. It signaled to the realm that no one was safe, that even the sons of queens could fall, and it set the stage for what would come next, because the Battle of the Gullet was still raging, and it was about to become something far worse. The fire that Jace had unleashed would be answered in kind, and the waters of the narrow sea would run red with the blood of dragons and men alike. That story, the story of the battle that would define the war, is one we must turn to next. But for now, we remember Vermax, the young dragon who burned bright and fell hard. And we remember the prince who gave everything for a throne he would never sit. Up next is Chapter 23, The Battle of the Gullet. Fire meets iron, where the conflict reaches its terrible climax, and the cost of war is counted in ships, in dragons, and in the lives of the fallen. The battle had begun with such promise. From the heights of the sky, Jace and his dragon, Vermax, had descended upon the Triarchy fleet like a storm made of fire and scale. And for those first precious moments, the wooden ships of the Essosi had seemed helpless. The dragon's flames had turned galleys to torches, had sent hundreds of screaming sailors into the churning waters of the Gullet, and the Black Fleet had roared its approval. But the enemy, it turned out, had been waiting for this. The Triarchy had not assembled the largest fleet seen in the narrow sea since the days of Aegon the Conqueror without preparing for the dragons. They had studied the battles of the dance, had learned from the fates of those who had faced Targaryen fire without strategy. And so, as Vermax swooped low over the water, his great wings beating against the salt spray, the Myrish galleys began to reveal their true purpose. They had rigged their ships with chains, long, heavy lengths of iron, strung between masts and across decks, designed not to hold but to snare. And they had trained their crews for this moment. From every deck, from every crow's nest, from the oar holes of the great war galleys, grappling hooks began to fly. Not the small hooks of fishermen, but great iron claws, weighted with lead, designed to catch the wings of a dragon. Vermax was young. He was fast, yes, and he was fierce. But he had not yet learned the caution of the older dragons. He had not yet learned to read the wind for traps. And Jace, for all his training, for all his intelligence, was still a prince of 15 years, still learning the limits of his mount. He saw the hooks coming, saw the lines of rope and chain arcing through the air, and he tried to pull up. But the dragon was too low, too close to the water, and the first hook caught. It struck the membrane of Vermax's left wing, tearing through the leathery skin with a sound that carried across the bay. The dragon roared, a sound of pain and fury, and Jace felt the beast's flight falter. The second hook came a moment later, then a third and a fourth. They were not trying to capture the dragon. They were trying to bring him down. And this was the moment when the Battle of the Gullet became the bloodiest Sebas in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. The chaos that followed was not a battle of strategy, not a battle of tactics. It was a battle of desperation, of fire meeting iron, of the last hopes of the Black Cause being dragged into the water by the sheer weight of the enemy's will. The Velaryon sailors, the men who had served Corlys Velaryon for decades, who had made the Velaryon fleet the greatest naval power in the known world, watched their prince fall. They saw the dragon struggling against the chains, saw the hooks digging deeper into his flesh, saw the blood running down his scales and into the sea. And they knew what they had to do. They had to save him. They had to save the dragon, or the war was lost. From every ship of the Black Fleet, sailors began to leap, not into the water, but onto the rigging, onto the decks, onto the very masts of their own ships, trying to get close enough to cut the lines. They were not dragon riders. They were not knights. They were fishermen and merchants and oarsmen, men who had spent their lives on the water, and they were willing to die for their prince. The Triarchy saw this, and they understood. If the dragon was freed, if Jace escaped, the battle would turn again. And so they gave the order that would seal the fate of the Gullet for all time. They ordered the archers to fire, not at the dragon, at the sailors. The Myrish crossbowmen, the finest marksmen in the free cities, had been waiting for this. They had been stationed on the high decks of the Triarchy galleys, their weapons loaded, their aim steady. And when the order came, they let loose a volley that darkened the sky. The bolts struck the Velaryon sailors as they tried to reach the chains, as they tried to save their prince. They fell into the water by the dozens, by the hundreds, their blood mixing with the dragon's blood, turning the Gullet red. But they did not stop. The Velaryon sailors, the men of the tides, the men who had sworn their lives to House Velaryon, did not stop. They kept coming. They kept climbing. They kept trying to reach the chains, even as the arrows struck them, even as their ships burned around them. And Jace, from the back of his dying dragon, saw them. He saw the sacrifice. He saw the loyalty. And he made a choice. He could not save Vermax. The dragon was too wounded, too tangled in the chains, too close to the water. But he could save the sailors. He could draw the fire away from them. He gave the command. He told Vermax to rise, to try one last time to climb above the hooks. And the dragon, loyal to the end, tried. He beat his wings. He strained against the chains. He pulled against the iron that was tearing his flesh, and for a moment, it seemed he might succeed. But the chains held. The weight was too great, and the dragon, exhausted, bleeding, dying, began to fall. Jace felt the world tilt. He felt the wind rush past him. He felt the water rise up to meet him. And he knew in that moment that this was the end. He did not scream. He did not cry out for his mother, for his brothers, for the gods. He simply held on to the saddle, held on to the dragon, held on to the last shred of his duty. As Vermax struck the water, the impact was terrible. The dragon, already wounded, already dying, crashed into the sea with a force that sent waves crashing against the hulls of the nearest ships. And Jace, thrown from the saddle, was in the water. He was a good swimmer. He had been raised on Dragonstone, had learned the currents of the narrow sea, but the water was full of fire, full of wreckage, full of the bodies of the sailors who had died trying to save him. And the Myrish crossbowmen, their work not yet done, were still firing. They saw him. They saw the prince, the heir to the Iron Throne, the son of Rhaenyra Targaryen, in the water, and they took aim. The first bolt struck him in the shoulder. The second struck him in the chest. The third, the fourth, the fifth, They came so fast that he could not count them, could not feel them, could only feel the cold of the water as it closed over his head. And then there was nothing. The Battle of the Gullet raged on for hours after Jace fell. The Velaryon fleet, seeing their prince die, seeing their dragon die, fought with a fury that had no reason. They burned the Triarchy ships. They killed the Mirish sailors. They turned the water black with smoke and red with blood. But they could not bring Jace back. His body was never found. The currents of the Gullet, the same currents that had carried the ships of the Velaryon fleet for centuries, took him. They took him down into the deep, into the dark, into the place where the dragons of the sea sleep forever. And on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra Targaryen, the queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the first men, heard the news. She heard that her son, her heir, her prince, was dead. She heard that Vermax, the dragon she had given him as an egg, was dead. She heard that the war she had started, the war she had fought, had taken everything from her, and she did not weep. She did not scream. She did not fall to her knees. She simply sat in the great hall of Dragonstone and stared at the sea, the same sea that had taken her son, the same sea that would take so many more. This was the cost of the dance. This was the cost of the crown, and it was only the beginning. The next chapter, the fall of the prince, will take us deeper into the grief that follows, into the decisions that are made in the dark, into the final moments of hope that the black cause still holds. But for now, the Gullet is silent. The fire has met the iron, and the iron has won. The chaos of the Gullet had no epicenter. It was everywhere at once. Fire met iron, and flesh and blood and salt water mingled into a churning froth that stained the waves red. Vermax, the young dragon, ferocious but exhausted, was pulled from his element. The grappling hooks had done their work, dragging the beast down towards the surface of the sea, where the ships of the Triarchy swarmed like sharks around a wounded whale. Prince Jasaerous felt the shift. The mighty beat of his dragon's wings suddenly faltered. A bolt, perhaps, or a lucky shot from a crossbow. History does not record the exact weapon, only its consequence. Vermax screamed, a sound that tore through the din of battle like a knife. And then the dragon twisted. He was falling. The sea rushed up to meet them, a vast, gray-green maw that swallowed the noise of the world. Jace clung to the saddle, the wind tearing at his hair, the spray stinging his eyes. He knew in that terrible incident that Vermax could not recover. They were going into the water. In that final moment, instinct took over. Jace had no time for fear, no time for a final prayer. He saw it, the shattered hull of a Triarchy galley, jutting from the water like a broken tooth. It was his only chance. He pulled the release on his saddle, the leather groaning as it gave way. He pushed off from his dying dragon, throwing his body towards the wreckage. He hit the water hard, the cold a shock that stole his breath. He kicked, he clawed, his armor dragging him down. His fingers found the slick, splintered wood of the wreck. He gasped, pulling himself up just enough to see. Vermax was gone, swallowed by the sea, and he was alone. But the battle was not over. The Myrish crossbowmen, perched in the rigging of a nearby carrack, had watched the prince fall. They saw the silver hair, the dragonglass dagger at his belt. They knew who he was, the heir to the Iron Throne. The orders were given, or perhaps they acted on their own, seeing the prize before them. They leveled their crossbows. The first bolt took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second found his chest, the third his throat. Prince Jacaerys Velaryon, the hope of the Blacks, the Dragon Prince, slipped from the wreckage into the cold, dark waters of the Gullet. The sea did not care for the wars of men. It simply took him. The Battle of the Gullet was a victory for the Blacks, but at a cost that would break them. The body of the prince was never recovered. His dragon, Vermax, was lost to the deep. When word reached Dragonstone, it did not arrive as a herald's trumpet. It arrived as a whisper, a rumor that grew into a wail that echoed through the stone halls. Rhaenyra Targaryen, the queen, felt the world stop. Her eldest son, her heir, the boy she had raised to be king, gone. His death did not just break her heart. It shattered the foundation of her sanity. The loss of a child is a terrible, unnatural thing, but the loss of a crown prince in the cruelest of wars transforms grief into something far more dangerous. It becomes a madness, and the realm had yet to see what a mother's madness would truly bring. The news of Jacaerys Velaryon's death reached Dragonstone not by raven, but by the broken, bleeding lips of a sailor who had been pulled from the churning waters of the Gullet. The man, a Velaryon deckhand whose name has been lost to history, was found half dead on the shores of Driftmark, his body riddled with splinters and his mind shattered by what he had witnessed. He was brought before Rhaenyra in the great hall of the Stone Drum, where the firelight cast long, dancing shadows across the Targaryen banners. The queen, still wearing the black of mourning, for her father, King Viserys, sat upon the throne of her ancestors, her hands gripping the armrests until her knuckles were white. She had not slept in days, not since she had sent her sons into the sky to defend the fleet. She had been waiting, hoping, praying to the gods she no longer believed in. And when the sailor finally spoke, when he choked out the words that Jasaerous was gone, that Vermax had fallen, that the prince had been shot from the sky like a common bird, the sound that escaped Rhaenyra's throat was not a scream. It was something far worse. It was a low, guttural wail that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul, a sound that echoed off the stone walls and silenced every whisper in the room. For a long moment, the queen did not move. She sat frozen, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance, as if she could see through the walls of the castle and across the sea to the spot where her son had taken his last breath. The courtiers, the lords, the knights who had gathered to hear the news, they all watched in horrified silence. No one dared approach her. No one dared speak. Daemon Targaryen, her husband, stood at the edge of the hall, his face a mask of stone, but his hands trembled at his sides. He had seen death. He had caused it. But this was different. This was the death of a child, and not just any child, but the heir to the Iron Throne, the boy who had been the very embodiment of hope for the Black cause. Rhaenyra's handmaidens, the women who had raised Jace from infancy, began to weep openly, their sobs filling the hall with a grief that was almost tangible. But Rhaenyra remained silent, her jaw clenched, her eyes dry. It was as if the tears had been burned away by a fire that was now consuming her from the inside out. When she finally spoke, her voice was not the voice of a queen. It was the voice of a mother who had been hollowed out, who had been left with nothing but a shell of rage. She asked for the details, for every single detail, no matter how gruesome. The sailor, trembling, told her how Jace had tried to leap from Vermax's back as the dragon fell, how he had reached for a piece of wreckage, how the Myrish crossbowmen had aimed for him, not for the dragon, but for the prince himself. They had known who he was. They had seen the silver hair, the dragon, the armor. They had shot him down with the same cold precision they would use on a deer. Rhaenyra listened, and with each word, something inside her seemed to break further. She did not ask about the battle. She did not ask about the fleet. She asked only if her son had suffered, if he had been afraid, if he had called for her. The sailor could not answer. He had seen Jace fall, but he had not seen him land. He had seen the water turn red, but he had not seen the prince's body. And that, the not knowing, the uncertainty of whether Jace's bones now rested on the seabed or had been devoured by the currents, that was the worst torture of all. In the days that followed, Rhaenyra withdrew from the world. She did not hold counsel. She did not issue commands. She did not even speak to Daemon, who tried to reach her, who tried to remind her that the war was not over, that there were still 2 sons to protect, that the realm still needed its queen. But Rhaenyra was not a queen anymore. She was a mother who had lost her firstborn, the boy she had held in her arms on the night of his birth, the boy she had taught to ride, the boy she had sent to the north to forge alliances, the boy she had trusted with the fate of her dynasty. And that boy was gone. The loss of Jasaerous was not just a personal tragedy. It was a strategic catastrophe. Jace had been the bridge, the diplomat, the reasonable voice in the Black Council. He had been the one who could temper Daemon's fire, who could negotiate with the stubborn lords, who could find a path through the bloodshed. Without him, there was no one left to hold the line. The Blacks had lost their most capable commander, their most promising heir, and the last shred of restraint that had kept the war from descending into pure, unadulterated madness. The effect on Rhaenyra's mental state was immediate and profound. She began to see enemies everywhere. She began to suspect that the Greens had not just killed her son, but that they had targeted him specifically, that they had known he was the key to the Black cause, and that they had sent the Triarchy to the Gullet with the sole purpose of cutting him down. This was not entirely untrue, but in Rhaenyra's grief, the truth became a weapon. She began to demand vengeance, not justice, not victory, but vengeance. She wanted the heads of every Green Lord, every Hightower, every Lannister who had ever spoken against her. She wanted to burn Oldtown to the ground. She wanted to feed Aegon II to his own dragon. Daemon, who had always been the more ruthless of the two, found himself suddenly the voice of reason, trying to pull Rhaenyra back from the edge. But she would not be pulled. She had lost her son, and in losing him, she had lost the last part of herself that had been capable of mercy. The war, which had been brutal, became something else entirely. It became a war of annihilation. The Blacks, under Rhaenyra's new command, stopped taking prisoners. They stopped offering terms. They stopped trying to win the hearts of the small folk. They simply killed. Every green soldier who was captured was put to the sword. Every castle that resisted was burned. Every town that flew the golden dragon of Aegon was razed. The Gullet had been a battle for control of the sea. Now, it was a battle for the very soul of the realm, and Rhaenyra was determined to drag that soul into the abyss with her. She sent ravens to the north, to the Riverlands, to the Vale, demanding that every lord send every man they could spare. She wanted an army so large that it would blot out the sun. She wanted to end the war not in a year, but in a month, in a week, in a day. She wanted to make the Greens feel the same pain she felt, the same hollow ache, the same endless, suffocating grief. And yet, even in her madness, there was a flicker of the old Rhaenyra. On the nights when the castles was quiet, when the fires had burned low, she would go to Jace's chambers. She would sit on his bed, surrounded by the books he had read, the maps he had drawn, the letters he had written to his brother Lucerys. She would hold his dragon egg, the one that had never hatched, the one that had been placed in his cradle as a symbol of his destiny. And she would whisper to him, as if he could hear her, as if he were still there. She would tell him that she was sorry, that she should never have sent him, that she should have gone herself. She would tell him that she loved him, that she had always loved him, that she would love him until the day she died. And then she would rise, her eyes dry again, her face hard, and she would go back to the war, because that was all she had left. The war was the only thing that could fill the void where her son had been. The loss of Jacaerys Velaryon, the dragon prince lost at sea, was not just the end of a life. It was the end of an era. He had been the last hope for a peaceful resolution, the last voice that could have called for restraint, the last hand that could have reached out across the divide. With him gone, the dance of the dragons became a dance of the dead, a spiral of violence that would not stop until the very last Targaryen had fallen. And Rhaenyra, the mother who had lost her son, was now the queen who would burn the world to ashes. The next chapter, the aftermath of the Gullet, would show just how far she was willing to go. The news of Jacaerys Velaryon's death reached Dragonstone like a wave crashing against a cliff, but it did not break the island. It shattered the queen who sat upon it. Rhaenyra, who had already lost so much, who had already given so many of her children to the winds of war, now faced the loss of her firstborn, her heir, the son she had raised to be a king. And in that moment, the war itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would become of the mother who had lost everything. But the battle of the Gullet was not yet over. The fighting raged on even as the prince's body disappeared beneath the churning waters. Even as the great dragon Vermax sank into the deep, his flames extinguished forever by the salt sea. The Triarchy's ships, those lumbering wooden beasts from the free cities of Essos, had come in force, and they had paid a terrible price for their victory. But the cost to the Blacks, to Rhaenyra's cause, was far more staggering than any tally of ships or men could measure. The Velaryon fleet, the very backbone of the Black naval power, had been shattered. Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake, had spent decades building the most formidable navy in the known world, a fleet of swift, sleek warships that could outmaneuver and outfight any opponent. But the Battle of the Gullet had reduced that proud armada to a collection of burning wrecks and broken hulls. The Triarchy, with their cunning tactics and their willingness to sacrifice everything for a single decisive blow, had caught the Velaryon fleet in a trap. They had struck at the heart of the Black cause, and they had left it bleeding. The numbers were almost too terrible to speak aloud. Of the great fleet that had once blockaded the Gullet, that had kept the trade routes of the narrow sea firmly in the hands of Rhaenyra's supporters, less than half remained. Dozens of ships, hundreds of sailors, thousands of loyal men who had served House Velaryon for generations, all gone in a single day of fire and blood. The Sea Snake himself, Lord Corlys, had been on Dragonstone when the news arrived, and when he heard the full extent of the losses, he did not weep. He simply sat in silence, his ancient face carved from stone, and stared at the sea as if he could see the ghosts of his ships still sailing upon it. And yet, even in the midst of this staggering defeat, there was a moment that would become one of the most tragic ironies of the entire war. A small ship, barely more than a fishing vessel, had been spotted fleeing the chaos of the battle. It was not a warship, not a vessel of the Triarchy or the Velaryon fleet. It was a simple craft carrying a single precious cargo. Prince Viserys, the youngest son of Rhaenyra and Daemon, the boy who had been sent to safety in Pentosos with his brother Aegon the Younger, had been captured. The story of how Viserys fell into enemy hands is a tale of desperation and betrayal. After the death of King Viserys I, Rhaenyra had sent her two youngest sons, Aegon and Viserys, across the narrow sea to the free city of Pentos, where they would be safe under the protection of the Prince of Pentos. but the war had a way of reaching even the most distant shores. The Triarchy, in their relentless pursuit of victory, had learned of the prince's location, and they had sent their agents to find them. Aegon the Younger, the boy who would one day be known as Aegon III, had been hidden away, his identity protected by loyal servants. But Viserys, the younger of the two, had been taken. The capture of Prince Viserys was a blow that struck at the very heart of Rhaenyra's family. She had already lost her father, her stepfather, her uncle, and now her eldest son. To lose another child, to have him taken into the hands of her enemies, was a wound that would never fully heal. The Triarchy, knowing the value of their prize, did not kill the young prince. They kept him alive, a bargaining chip, a hostage to be used against the queen, who had already lost so much. And so, as the sun set over the smoking ruins of the Gullet, the black cause was left to count its dead. Jacaerys Velaryon was gone. The Velaryon fleet was broken, and now the youngest prince of the Targaryen dynasty was a prisoner of war. The victory, if it could even be called a victory, was Pyrrhic at best. The Blacks had won the battle, in the sense that the Triarchy had been forced to retreat, their own losses too great to continue the assault. But the cost of that victory was so high, so devastating, that it felt more like a defeat than any triumph. Rhaenyra, on Dragonstone, was consumed by a grief that bordered on madness. She had always been a strong woman, a queen who had fought for birthright against all odds. But the loss of Jace, the loss of her firstborn, the loss of the son, who had been the very embodiment of her hopes for the future, was a blow from which she would never truly recover. She began to see enemies everywhere, to trust no one, to lash out at those who had failed to protect her children. The war, which had once been a struggle for the throne, had become a personal vendetta, a quest for vengeance that would consume everything in its path. And yet, even in the depths of her despair, there was a glimmer of something that would shape the future of the dynasty. The story of Prince Viserys, the boy who had been taken into captivity, would not end with his capture. It would become a legend in its own right, a tale of survival and resilience that would echo through the ages. But that is a story for another time, a story that will be told in the chapter we call The Eternal Prince, Legacy and Lore. For now, the aftermath of the Gullet is a time of mourning, a time of reckoning, a time when the Black Cause must ask itself if it can survive the loss of its brightest hope. The staggering losses of the Battle of the Gullet were not merely counted in ships and men. They were measured in the desperate flight of Prince Viserys into captivity, a thread of tragedy woven into the very fabric of that terrible day. But as the waters of the narrow sea settled and the true cost washed ashore on Dragonstone, a different kind of accounting began. It was not an accounting of gold or galleys, but of legacy, of what had been lost in the person of Jacaerys Velaryon. Among Rhaenyra's children, Jasaerous was always considered the best of them. It is a rare tribute in the brutal histories of the dance, a consensus that bridges the chasm between the accounts of the Blacks and the Greens, maesters who served opposing lords, sellswords who fought on different sides, and great lords who bent the knee to different kings. They all seem to agree on this one point, that the eldest son of Rhaenyra Targaryen possessed a quality of leadership that his siblings, for all their virtues, did not possess in equal measure. He was the prince who could speak to a Stark in the frost of Winterfell as easily as he could command a captain on the decks of Driftmark. He was the rider who flew his dragon into the frozen north and secured the most crucial alliance of the war, the Pact of Ice and Fire. He was not just a warrior. He was a diplomat who understood the fragile architecture of the realm's allegiance. History writes him as earnest, dutiful, and just. In a conflict defined by treachery and petty vengeance, he remains a figure of genuine hope, making his loss not just a tactical disaster for the Blacks, but a moral tragedy for the entire realm. Yet, for all that history seems to agree on the shape of his character, the man himself remains an enduring mystery. We know the public deeds, but the private heart is harder to find. Much of this mystery stems from the shadow that hung over his birth, the whispers of his parentage, the persistent rumor that he was not a Velaryon at all, but the son of Harwin Strong, were a constant hum beneath the music of court life. This question of legitimacy defined the succession war. It was the knife the Greens used to cut Rhaenyra's claim to ribbons. It forced young Jasaerous into a lifetime of proving himself to be the most princely, the most Targaryen, the most worthy. And then there is the second mystery, the one locked in the deep snows of the north. His journey to secure the Stark alliance was meant to be a straightforward diplomatic mission, but it became a legend. The stories speak of a secret marriage in a godswood beneath a weirwood tree, a union with a woman named Sara Snow. Did Jacaerys find love in the north? Did he pledge himself to a figure the southern histories try desperately to forget? The chronicles are maddeningly vague, but the myth persists. This hidden chapter adds the deepest layer of romantic tragedy to his story. He was a prince with a hidden heart, a diplomat who gave more of himself to the cause than any demand required. It is this combination of proven leadership and concealed depth that makes the question of what might have been so bitterly compelling. What if Jacaerys had survived the Gullet? What if he had mounted the Iron Throne as King Jasaerous I? The realm that emerged from the dance was broken, impoverished, and robbed of its dragons. Under Jasaerous, it might have been entirely different. He was Rhaenyra's heir, but he was not his mother in her final madness. He had her ambition, but he tempered it with a patience inherited from the calm diplomacy of his youth. A King Jasaerous I would have inherited a kingdom that needed mending. He had the respect of the North, ties to the Riverlands, and the unwavering support of the Velaryon fleet. He would have been a king who could bridge the divide. He understood dragons not just as weapons of war, but as symbols of unity. Many maesters believe that if Jacaerys had lived, the Targaryen dynasty would have survived its deepest wounds. The remaining dragons would not have been extinguished. The civil war would have ended at his coronation. The entire history of Westeros would have been rewritten from that single lost moment. Consider the political landscape he would have navigated. Aegon the Younger, his half-brother, would have been his heir. The Velaryons, wealthy from the war, would have been his strongest allies. He would have had to reconcile the warring houses, to punish the conspirators without creating a cycle of infinite vengeance. It was a task demanding immense patience and political intellect. From everything we know, Jacaerys was uniquely suited for it. He was described as serious, wise beyond his 15 years. The war did not break his spirit. It forged him. He saw the carnage of the Gullet firsthand. He would have known better than anyone that the path of conquest was a path of fire and blood. But that ruling required something more. It required the frost of the north in your heart and the salt of the sea in your blood. He had both. He is the eternal prince because he was never allowed to become the king. His story is frozen in amber, a perfect specimen of potential. We can only guess at the laws he would have passed, the promises he would have kept, the children he would have fathered. History is full of might-have-beens, but few are as haunting as the reign of Jacaerys Velaryon. He was the bridge the realm needed, and when he fell into the sea, that bridge was burned. His body was never recovered. The deep currents of the Gullet took him, and the sea has kept its prize ever since. His story, from the moment of his disputed birth to his secret vows in the north, to his final dive into the abyss, remains one of the most captivating enigmas of House Targaryen. The stories that surround his disappearance, the myths that grew in the absence of a body, are the final whispers of his legend, the tale of a prince who never truly came home. Next time, we will explore those final echoes in the chapter called The Dragon Lost at Sea. Last chapter, we contemplated the Cudhaves, a realm ruled by King Jasaerous I, a peace that might have lasted a century. History, in its cruel wisdom, decided to try out the opposite. It gave us the story of a prince who existed just long enough to reveal what was lost, a taste of a better future that was never allowed to arrive. That future died the same way Jasaerous did, drowning in the cold, bloodied water of the Gullet. Let us pause and take full measure of the cost. When we speak of the dance of the dragons, we speak of thrones usurped, of castles burned, of dragons falling from the sky. But the deepest wound of this war is not counted in stone and steel. It is counted in the breath of the young. Jacaerys Velaryon was 15 years old. He was an envoy, a diplomat, a dragon rider, an heir to the Iron Throne. But in any other time, in any other peace, he would simply have been a boy learning to rule, to love, to wrestle with the weight of a name. The war did not grant him that grace. It demanded everything. It demanded he fly into battle not as a king, but as a commander risking his own life. It demanded he fight for his mother's claim, a claim he believed in wholly, a claim that placed a target on his back the moment he was born, a claim made even more fragile by the whispers of his parentage that followed him everywhere he walked. He was never allowed to be just a boy. He was always a weapon. And in the chaos of the Gullet, the weapon broke. This is the true tragedy of youth in the Dance of the Dragons. The realm lit itself on fire, and the brightest flames were the ones that were extinguished first. Lucerys, Jace's brother, was barely 14 when he was devoured by Vhagar. Jace himself was a whisper, away from the fullness of his manhood. The cost of the war was not just the gold spent or the ships sunk. It was the silence of the training yards where their laughter once echoed. It was the empty chairs at the council tables where their council was meant to sit. It was the tears of a mother who sent a messenger and received a ghost. There is a reason why historians look at the moment of Jace's fall and mark it as a turning point, not merely of the war, but of the entire dynasty. The Targaryen Golden Age, that century of unprecedented power and prosperity that began with Aegon the Conqueror, did not end with a grand battle or a formal surrender. It ended with a single crossbow bolt striking a prince in the back as he tried to escape his dying dragon. It ended in the salt spray and the chaos of the narrow sea. It ended quietly, away from the eyes of the court, witnessed only by the screaming sailors and the silent waves. Jasaerous was not just any heir, he was the best of them. History is written by the winners, and the Greens eventually won the War of Succession, at least in the immediate sense. Yet even their own chroniclers cannot speak ill of him. He was wise beyond his years, reasonable. He was the bridge between the old guard and the new, between the dragon riders and the lords of the mainland. The entire future of the dynasty rested upon his shoulders, and with his death, that future shattered into 1,000 pieces that could never be fully reassembled. It was the symbolic end of the Targaryen Golden Age because it represented the death of potential. The blood of the dragon was strong in him. The qualities of a great king were evident in every decision he made. He had the loyalty of the Velaryon fleet, a pact with the Starks of Winterfell, the ferocity of the dragon Vermax. He had everything needed to forge a reign of legend. But the dance of the dragons cares nothing for potential. It cares only for the present moment. And in the present moment of 130 years after the conquest, the most promising heir to ever wait for the Iron Throne met his end not in a glorious duel, but in a desperate scramble for survival on a burning deck, falling into a sea that would not let him go. So let us go there one last time, to the Gullet, the narrow stretch of water that saw more dragonfire and human blood than almost any other place in Westeros. The waves there are restless. They have no memory of the war, no sympathy for the fallen. They simply roll in day after day, year after year. But if you listen closely, in the quiet hours of the night when the world is still, you can almost hear the echo of the battle. The roar of dying dragons, the screams of men, the hiss of water meeting flame, and then just silence, a deep, profound, eternal silence. Beneath those waves, the Prince of Dragonstone rests, not in a tomb of carved stone, not in the crypts of the Dragonmont beneath his mother's castle. He rests in the cold, vast, indifferent embrace of the sea. Vermax lies tangled in the wreckage of a dozen shattered hulls, his bones slowly returning to the earth, becoming part of the seabed. And somewhere nearby, in the darkness that sunlight never touches, lie the remains of the boy who rode him. There is a certain melancholic peace to this image. He is not a statue in a courtyard, cold and lifeless. He is not a portrait in a dusty hall, fading away. He is a legend that lives in the salt and the wind. The Gullet is his tomb, the sea is his monument. It is a fitting, if terrible, resting place for a dragon prince. No conqueror can desecrate his grave. No enemy can claim his bones. They belong to the deep now. A king who never was, buried in the shadow of the tide. And that perhaps is the final legacy of Jacaerys Velaryon. He was a boy of summer who had died in the autumn of the Targaryen dynasty. He was the flame that was smothered before it could become a bonfire. The dance of the dragons took a son, a brother, an heir, and a dream. His story serves as a profound warning of what happens when ambition overrides wisdom, when vengeance overtakes justice. But it also serves as a reminder of what could have been. A prince of immense potential, lost to the darkness of a war he never started. In the memory of the realm, he remains frozen, forever young, forever brave, forever falling toward the water. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, remember the Prince of Dragonstone, not as a ghost of a forgotten war, but as a boy who did his duty, who loved his family fiercely, and who gave his life for a crown he was never meant to wear. The waves of the Gullet roll on, indifferent to the history they swallowed. The dance is long over. The fires have burned out. But the story of Jacaerys Velaryon, the dragon lost at sea, will echo through the ages as long as there are those who listen to the whisper of the tide. As the fire fades and the sea grows calm, the Prince of Dragonstone finds his rest at last. Sleep well. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.